Chapter 299. In the abandoned pavilion, second brother quietly looked at the disappearing mountain in the distance. There was no extra emotion on his face, only calmness and silence. His ancient hat was upright like a peak, and his hands were behind his back like clouds. Soon after, in the space where the disappearing mountain was, countless dark clouds suddenly gathered, and snowflakes danced wildly. Then, some transparent and invisible things vaguely appeared in the distance. The invisible barrier was overflowing with colorful lights, and it was extremely beautiful. Then, countless stars could be vaguely seen twinkling in it. After an unknown amount of time, the twinkling stars suddenly disappeared, and the space where the snow gathered turned pitch black. The order and rules there seemed to have become static, or it could be said that the time had come to an end. A bolt of lightning struck down from the sky. This bolt of lightning tore through the space for a very long distance, and was as thick as a river. However, there was no sound of thunder, nor any color, but it was extremely pure and milky white. The earth trembled slightly, and the dark space suddenly collapsed. The mountain peak that had disappeared inexplicably reappeared in the world. Two majestic and powerful auras ran side by side. After the clouds outside the mountain peak were torn into pieces by these two auras, they slowly accelerated according to an unknown pattern and gradually turned into a huge cloud vortex. Second brother silently looked at that place, and after a long time, he sincerely praised, "This is the real Tao." Standing behind second brother, Chun Pippi looked at the cloud vortex at the waist of the mountain, and felt that every inch of his skin was a little numb. He carefully sensed the two powerful breaths that were slowly disappearing and murmured in shock, "They actually broke through the 5 states? This is really incredible. How did they do it? If they can take one step, they can take countless steps. At that moment, who knows how many steps they have taken above the 5 states?" Second brother slightly frowned, and then walked towards the mountain. Since the mountain had reappeared in the world, it could be climbed. The muddy mountain path seemed to have been altered by the great sculptor of time, making it hard and untouchable. The splashes of mud and the pits formed by the crushed mud were like stone sculptures lying quietly on the ground. Even the smallest details could be seen clearly. Thus, it gave off a completely different feeling from usual. Stepping on the mountain path was like stepping on the beautiful rivers and mountains and the history of mankind. Since the mountain was still there, the top and the cliff were naturally still there, but it seemed to be reorganized by some kind of power and became a new existence. The cliff stones were broken into white powder, and it was as fine as the beach of the South Sea. Only a poplar tree was intact and stood there alone. It should have grown in the cold peak of the cold plain, but now it appeared on the beach of the sea. So it was ridiculous. She was kneeling on the edge of the cliff, and was constantly putting the remaining ashes on the ground into 2 urns beside her. Her little hands were very carefully, and her slender fingers were gently digging the cracks on the ground. She gently scraped the edges of her palms, and then she held the urns carefully. She pursed her lips, but did not cry. She opened her eyes widely, and repeated the action mechanically and numbly. Even her bright eyes were not filled with sadness. This was the first scene that second brother and Chun Pippi saw when they reached the top of the mountain. This scene would stay in their hearts for a long time, and make them support the protagonist of this painting in some aspects without any reason. Walking to the edge of the cliff, second brother looked at the floating clouds in front of him, and reached out his hand to feel the 2 auras that were about to completely disappear. He glanced at the little handmaiden whose skirt was hanging on the ground, and said, "Let them stay here. This is my teacher." Sang Sang shook her head and said, pointing to the new urns. She pointed to the old urns and said, "This is young master's teacher." Then she lowered her head and said, "Young master must want to know what my teacher looks like, and he must want to see his teacher again. So I have to bring them back to young master, and I can't let them be blown away by the wind." In the Taoist hall deep in the southern gate temple, Li Qingshan, the nation master of Tang, stared at the reflection on the dark-colored paulownia floor in a daze. He did not notice how pale and haggard his face was, because at this time there was only that wretched and ridiculous face in his eyes. He knew that he would never see that face again. Although he sometimes felt helpless and even a little tired of that face in the past years, he still fell into great sorrow at this time. Was it because of his senior brother's slutty behavior, or because he was always like a child in front of him? Li Qingshan looked at the reflection on the floor and smiled bitterly. People only knew that he was the nation master of Haotian's South School Temple, but few people knew about his senior brother. However, it was his senior brother who helped him block Liu Bai's sword. Now that the great divine priest of light came to Chang'an, it was still his senior brother who stood in front of him. "Master, drink the medicine." He Mingqi raised the medicine tray over his head. He knew that his master was very sad at this time, but as a disciple, he had to protect his master's health, especially at such a sad moment. "Put it down." Li Qingshan restrained his pain and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I'll drink it later." He Mingqi put down the medicine tray and silently withdrew from the Taoist hall. Outside the doorway, he picked up the yellow paper umbrella and tucked it under his armpit. After a few steps, he was surrounded by the Taoist priests and nuns in the snowy garden. The death of Master Yen Sei might not cause a ripple among the people, because not many people knew his name. However, these Taoist priests of the Southern School were different. Their faces were full of sadness and anger. A Taoist nun asked in a trembling voice, "How could that person hide in Chang'an for so long?" It was still snowing outside the courtyard of the military ministry. The sky was gloomy as if Haotian was angry. The atmosphere in the room was depressed like the gloomy sky. The generals' faces were full of anger and shame. How could that person hide in Chang'an for so long? The one who asked in a low voice was Defender General of the State Su Shi of the Tang Empire. After receiving the secret order from His Majesty, he returned to Chang'an at an unimaginable speed. However, when he entered the city gate at noon, he heard the shocking news. Among the military generals who had the qualifications to cooperate with Master Yen Sei, now he was the only one left in the whole world, the first person in the military of the empire. So this news made him angry and more painful. Defender General Su Shi's face was so gloomy that it seemed to drip water. He looked at the crowd and said in a cold voice, "Just this morning, one of the pillars of the Tang Empire fell. I don't care who the enemy is. I only know that His Majesty gave you dozens of days, but you failed to find and kill him." The generals in the room lowered their heads. Some wanted to refute that it should be the negligence of the Imperial Center administration. However, facing the angry face of Defender General of the State Su Shi and the strong sense of honor deep in their hearts as soldiers of the Tang Empire, they didn't say anything. Don't try to shirk the responsibility, unless you forget your identity. You are soldiers. The land under your feet is the capital of the Tang Empire, Chang'an. Therefore, you have the obligation to ensure the safety here. Instead of letting a person old enough to be your grandfather take the risk to fight. He looked at Defender General of Huaihua and said sternly, "Why didn't you take the initiative to attack at that time?" Defender General of Huaihua stood up, lowered his head and said shamefully, "His Majesty strictly ordered to ensure the safety of the residents of Chang'an. If we used the armored black cavalry, it would be too shocking. Moreover, the opponent was too strong." Su Shi slightly narrowed his eyes and suddenly shouted angrily, "Is the great divine priest of West Hill so great? You are scared out of your wits, so you can only hide like mice and watch coldly like onlookers. When have the Tang Empire's soldiers been so timid? Have there been less cultivators in the knowing destiny state who fell under the soldiers' arrows on the battlefield?" After saying this, he coughed violently and painfully until he couldn't stand up. Defender General's gray hair fluttered in the wind and the wrinkles around his eyebrows were very deep. The generals in the hall knew that this was the beginning of the general's lung disease. They couldn't help but feel ashamed and anxious. They hurriedly called for the medical officer to come in and treat him. Su Shi struggled to straighten up and looked at the generals with a stern expression. He said, "I don't blame you for what happened this morning. After all, it was the South Gate Temple and the Academy who attacked first. But I really want to know how Wei Guangming could hide in Chang, and for so many days, and why no one in the Tang Empire could find him. What on earth happened? Investigate carefully. If the military is lazy or timid, kill them all. If it's the Imperial Center Administration or the Southgate Temple, report to me. I will ask for the Imperial decree to kill them and bury them with Master Yen Sei." The general's painful coughs and angry shouts intertwined for a long time. There were 4 magnificent Taoist temples on the top of Peach Mountain closest to the sky. When there was no worship ceremony, no one was allowed to come close. Even the divine priests were rarely seen. It seemed empty, quiet, and indifferent. In the dark temple near the edge of the cliff, there was a painful cough. The confinement of the great divine priest of judgment was broken by the great divine priest of light and was injured until now. At this time, when he heard the news of that person's death, he was so emotional that he coughed. There was no sound in the divine hall of revelation, only silence. The White Temple, which was relatively the simplest, was completely silent, because the great divine priest of light, who was supposed to be in the temple, had not sat on the throne for nearly 15 years, and he would never come back again. A sigh was heard from the pristine white divine hall at the highest point. It was a soft sigh, but it resounded throughout the Peach Mountain like thunder. Then, it became silent all of a sudden. After an unknown period of time, the majestic voice rang out again. "How can the successor of light wander in the mortal world? He should be taken back to Taoism." On a nameless island in the far south, a Taoist in indigo stood on a high reef, silently looking at the boiling sea in front of him. He had been watching the sea here for many days, but he did not know what mysteries he had seen. One day, he felt something and turned to look at the mainland. He frowned slightly and said softly, "What on earth did you see? How much of your light will the successor you have found be able to inherit? How much lucky chance does he have? Is this wine? Does it deserve to be called wine?" In a small remote county of Gushan Commandery, an extremely angry voice sounded in an inconspicuous wine shop near the street. The one who shouted hoarsely and accused the bad tavern was a tall old man whose face was completely red. He wore a purple lambskin robe and a black overcoat. The material seemed to be extremely expensive, but it was unknown whether it was because it had been weathered for a long time or because of other reasons, but the old man always felt a little old when he wore it. The wine shop owner was a very strong middle-aged man. He stared at the old man in front of him and spat on the ground fiercely. He said disdainfully, "This is the most famous Jiujiang double-distilled wine in Gushan Commandery. What? You have a problem with that?" The old man angrily lifted the wine bag in his hand and spat everywhere. He said, "Do you think I have never drunk good wine? How can Jiujiang double-distilled wine be as bland as your wine?" The wine shop owner stared at him and pushed him away. He scolded, "I'm giving you face because you are a little old. Don't take it. My double-distilled wine is so bland. What can you do?" The old man trembled with anger. He rolled up his sleeves and was ready to step forward. He shouted, "I can tolerate the taste of chicken soup stewed into white vinegar, but how can I neglect the wine? If I can tolerate it, I can't." After a moment, the old man was beaten out of the wine shop. His originally meticulously combed hair was now a mess, and the black cloak on his body was torn into several large holes. He looked extremely miserable. The old man stood on the street and shouted at the wine shop, "Country bumpkin, I have to wait for the old man to come out before I dare to come out. You filthy things don't even know the principle of respecting the old and respecting the wise. How could a shop that sold fake wine understand such a profound principle? Immediately, a few shop assistants carrying sticks rushed out. The old man screamed and ran away with his head in his hands. He ran faster than the young people. Even though he ran in a hurry, he still held the wine bag tightly in his hand. It seemed that even the worst wine was better than nothing. He ran out of the county and came to a dilapidated Taoist temple. An old yellow bull was eating grass in boredom. Probably because grass was not as delicious as fish or mutton, it was extremely tired and kicked its front hooves angrily from time to time. Seeing the old man run back to the Taoist temple in embarrassment, the old yellow bull raised its head and mooed, as if laughing at him. The old man opened the wine bag and drank 2 mouthfuls. When his breathing gradually stopped, he could not help but shake his head and sigh that people's hearts were not what they used to be. Then he walked to the stone steps of the temple and picked up a piece of firewood to dig into the ashes of the dying fire. 2 pieces of potatoes were dug out from the ashes and rolled on the ground. The old yellow bull walked over and looked at the old man attentively and affectionately. The old man was furious. He pointed at the 2 burnt potatoes with the firewood and shouted, "I told you to watch the fire, I told you to watch the fire. Can you still eat them after they've been burnt to ashes? Can you still call them potatoes?" In the far north, in the Tianqi Mountains deep in the wilderness, in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, which had been forgotten for many years, Ning Ke woke up, but he could not remember what had happened. He looked around the dark room blankly and found that the hill made of white skeletons had collapsed into rubble. There were only 2 iron chains left where the old monk was, and the front end of the chains was a pile of ashes. Then he remembered everything and his body suddenly relaxed. However, looking at the pile of ashes, he did not know why there was an inexplicable sadness in his heart. "Thank you. I will continue to work hard to write the story. Please continue to support me. Thank you." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 300. Ning Ke looked at his black and dirty hand. He could not see any difference from before. He clenched his fists and did not notice any difference in his body. At least his arms were still as thick as before, and he did not become one of those legendary green-painted monsters with infinite strength. However, he knew that something must have changed during the time he was unconscious. The aura in the mottled sword marks on the surrounding stone walls had disappeared without a trace, and the chi of heaven and earth in the room had returned to a normal level. The aura that had been injected into his body at the beginning must have calmed down after it finished training his body. He silently used his psyche power to check the movements in his body and found that the snow mountain and ocean of Qi still existed. The broad passage from the ocean of Qi to the snow mountain had also stabilized. The lower end of the passage between the internal organs led to a certain place in his lower abdomen, condensing into a very dim ball of light in front of the snow mountain. With the agitation of his psyche power, hundreds of auras similar to the chi of heaven and earth were released from there. They followed the trajectory of his meridians and dispersed into every bone and every pore. When the chi of heaven and earth that had been stored in the depths of his lower abdomen dispersed around, Ning Ke felt as if he had soaked in a hot spring with just the right temperature. His body was warm, but it did not make him feel tired. Instead, it stimulated his spirit and made his 5 senses much sharper. He looked at the mottled sword marks on the roof that seemed to have lost their lives. His mind moved along with the direction of the sword mark. The warm and even somewhat hot aura moved quickly in his meridians. Then, he gradually felt that there were some extremely fine aura fragments in the air that entered his body along with his breathing. The speed at which the chi of heaven and earth entered his body was very slow. It was much slower than the speed at which the aura in youngest uncle's sword marks entered his body when he first joined the devil. However, he was very clear that if he did not forget to cultivate youngest uncle's great spirit, the chi of heaven and earth in nature would continue to enter his body. No matter how slow the speed was, as time passed, his state of strength would continue to increase. Is this joining the devil? However, if I keep taking from heaven and earth like this, endlessly taking and strengthening myself, when will it stop? Is that why I can't take? Is that why they're called demons? Ning Ke slowly lowered his head and silently sensed the path and way of the aura in his body. His dirty face was full of confusion and faint fear of the unknown. His cotton clothes, which were stained with blood, oil, and dust, seemed to have sensed his emotions and became stiff and cringed, wrinkled, and ugly. It was quiet in the room. Suddenly, he remembered something important and woke up with a start. He used the fastest and most inconspicuous method to get out of the state of cultivating great spirit and walked to the corner of the room. Mo Shanshan's black hair, which was as messy as a summer waterfall, was scattered on her cotton dress. After a dangerous battle, her white cotton dress was already covered in dust and blood, but for some reason, it still gave off a clean smell in the dark room. Ning Ke squatted beside the girl and felt the clean aura from her body. Looking at her black hair and white dress, he somehow felt dirty and did not dare to touch her body. This strange emotion was quickly thrown away by him. He gently helped the young talisman master to sit properly and took out some medicine from his arms to carefully feed her. Then, he gently patted her back to help her disperse the medicine. After some time, Mo Shanshan finally woke up. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly on her pale face due to the loss of blood. She opened her eyes and revealed a nervous and even a little timid expression. When she fainted, the battle in the room was still going on. She did not know who won and even thought that Ning Ke and herself had fallen into the hands of the old monk and become his food like Yi Hongyu. It was not until she saw that the old monk had turned into ashes that Mo Shanshan was slightly relieved. She panted and held Ning Ke's hand tightly. Her body trembled slightly, and it seemed that she could not forget what she had experienced in her mind. Ning Ke's hand was tightly held by her and even faintly painful. He did not express any objection and only hugged her silently, patting her back gently to comfort her. Suddenly, he frowned slightly and pulled his hand out from Mo Shanshan's hand. Mo Shanshan looked up at him and did not know what had happened. She looked a little absent-minded and uneasy. Ning Ke helped her to sit by the wall and picked up his padao from the ground. He silently walked to the opposite side. It was unknown when the Tao addict had woken up from her coma. She was leaning against the wall and looking at them indifferently. That pure and charming beautiful face looked a little pitiful because of the serious injury and blood loss. However, Ning Ke knew how powerful and terrifying the other party was and would not be softened by these external appearances. Looking at Ning Ke, who was approaching her step by step with the padao, Yi Hongyu's indifferent eyes were filled with self-mockery and contempt. She bent her right hand that was weakly hanging by her thigh with difficulty and pinched her index and middle fingers together to pinch a sword formula. However, just as her psyche power was about to be released, a mouthful of black sticky blood spurted from her lips and landed on her dress that was already stained with blood. It added another color to the various hideous red stains. Yi Hongyu looked at the blood dripping from her dress and smiled with a complicated expression. Then, she gave up on her anger and leaned against the wall tiredly. Both her movements and her expression were so weak. Among the three of them, she had suffered the most serious injury. First, her sense of perception had been directly shattered. Then, Master Lotus had used the Tao Tai demonic skill twice. Finally, she had forcefully lowered her state in exchange for a stunning blow. She was no longer as powerful and proud as she was in the snow-capped peak. However, when she looked at Ning Ke, who was walking towards her, there was no other emotion in her eyes. There was no anger, no begging, no despair, no sadness. Even the contempt and self-mockery at the beginning had all disappeared. There was only calmness. Ning Ke stood in front of her with his padao and looked at her eyes silently and attentively. There was no such thing as not taking advantage of someone when they were in a precarious situation in his dictionary. He would do anything to ensure that they could survive and live a better life. Therefore, he believed that if he did not take action when the enemy was in danger, he would definitely be punished by heaven. This girl who was leaning against the wall and looked so weak that she seemed like she could die at any moment was not an ordinary girl. She was the most powerful Tao addict among the younger generation of Hautian Taoism and his enemy. How could he forget the scene outside the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine when he used the primordial 13 arrows and the divine talisman that his teacher had left for him but still could not defeat her? Instead, he was beaten like a dog by her. If he did not kill Yi Hongyu now, would she not kill him after she recovered her state? Strangely, Ning Kai did not pick up the padao and directly pierce through her chest. Instead, he looked at her silently for a long time. He looked at the two tragic and terrifying wounds on her shoulders and arms. He thought about how the missing flesh and blood had already been swallowed by the old monk and then turned into a part of the pile of ashes. The sharp tip of the slender and long padao pierced into the cracks of the stone slabs like a spider web. If it was in the past, I would definitely kill you. Ning Kai looked at her and said seriously. Due to some very complicated reasons, he had made a difficult decision. It was because if the Tao addict had not risked her life, he would have died when he was comprehending the youngest uncle's sword style. It was because Mo Shanshan had whispered something behind him. It was because he did not care about the wrath of heaven. It was because he finally confirmed that she had fainted at the last stage of the battle and did not hear the conversation about joining the devil between him and Lotus. Since we have fought side by side, I think at least in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, we are comrades. I don't care about reputation like most Tangs, but I am a soldier of the Tang Empire. I don't have the habit of killing comrades on the battlefield. So if you agree that we are comrades here, then we can talk about any problems outside. Yi Hongyu looked at Ning Kai's face calmly. It was not a long time, but it felt like a long time. She was very clear that Ning Kai's temperament was very similar to hers. He was a man who would do anything to achieve his goals, so she was ready to welcome death. However, she did not expect him to make such a choice. She was the intelligent Tao addict and the Grand Master of the Judicial Department who maintained justice in Hautian Taoism. So she did not say that he would regret it if he did not kill her now like other stupid female villains. Instead, she looked at Ning Kai and said seriously, I saved your life before and you saved mine later. So we are equal. If you don't kill me now, then I will return the favor when I come to kill you in the future. Ning Kai nodded and said, sounds fair. Deal. After saying this, he put down his slender padao and squatted down in front of Yi Hongyu. He stretched out his hand to tear off her skirt, wanting to check on her injuries. But his actions were a little rough and he did not pity her at all. Yi Hongyu looked at his fingers caressing her naked shoulders. She frowned and could not help showing disgust in her eyes. But she said calmly, I know you mean well, but I hate men who touch my body. This is an uncontrollable instinct. If you are not happy, you can treat my disgust as joy. Ning Kai lowered his head and focused on the two horrifying wounds. He looked at the faintly visible white bones and shook his head. He did not care about the disgust in her eyes at all and said, It's not a good thing to be liked by you. You'd better hate me. I just have to tell you that your wounds seem to be a little troublesome. Yi Hongyu did not hesitate and asked directly, What do you want? You are indeed the Tao addict. You are indeed straightforward. Ning Kai looked at her pale side profile and said very seriously, It will cost me money to treat your wounds. If the great divine priest of judgment asks how long Qing was disabled in the future, can you put in a good word for me? I'm not asking you to lie. I'm just asking you to describe the scene of the accident objectively. It was because Long Qing threatened Sang Sang that he had been thinking hard about breaking the realm by the Daming Lake. He had accumulated his cold, killing intent for more than 10 days before shooting that talisman arrow. But now he wanted the Tao addict to admit that it was an accident. It was really shameless. To Ning Kei's surprise, Yi Hongyu did not mock him. Instead, she became silent and said slowly after a long time, "If you are worried that the great divine priest will be angry at you because Long Qing was disabled, then I can promise to solve this problem for you. Let me tell you something. I just realized that I made a big mistake in everything I wrote after my book friend reminded me. That is, I wrote Fu as Liao. I can say that other mistakes are clerical errors, and most of them are indeed clerical errors. I really can't do anything about it. It is just that I have not learned the basic knowledge of Chinese well. I have changed all of them in the manuscript. I really can't do VIP. Please forgive me and try not to make mistakes in the future. Thank you for your monthly votes. There is still one chapter left today. The time is not fixed. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 301. Prince Long Qing was the most promising figure in the younger generation of Haotian Taoism. He was the priest of the judicial department and the brilliant and beautiful son of God who attracted women and fools to Haotian Taoism. However, his body and spirit were destroyed by an arrow in the Tianqi Mountains. Ning Kei's arrow had caused the West Hill Divine Palace to lose a future great divine priest of judgment or even an even more important figure and future. How could the divine hall not be furious? How could the great divine priest of judgment let go of Ning Kei? Even if the West Hill Divine Palace would not kill him directly for the sake of the headmaster of the academy and the headmaster of the academy, they would definitely make him pay a heavy price. Ning Kei shuddered every time he thought of the great divine priest of judgment, who was such a terrifying bigwig, thinking of getting rid of him day and night. That was why he said those words to Yi Hongyu. His original intention was to test how angry the divine hall would be. He did not expect that Yi Hongyu would directly promise that the great divine priest of judgment would not make trouble for him. This answer made him a little confused. If there had always been some hidden competition between the Tao addict and Prince Long Qing, it would make sense that she did not care about Long Qing being deposed. But why did she promise that the great divine priest of judgment would not be angry because of this? Why? He stared at Yi Hongyu in confusion. Yi Hongyu did not answer his question. She looked down at the horrible bloody hole in her shoulder and looked annoyed. She asked, "How long do you need to heal me?" Ning Kei rummaged through his luggage for a suitable tool. He lowered his head and said, "It won't take long if it's to stop the bleeding and remove the rot. The key is that the old monk bit too hard. Also, that guy probably hasn't brushed his teeth in decades. He's very dirty. Who knows what kind of poison is in his saliva? Maybe I'll have to cut some meat off later." No one knew when Emo Shanshan had walked to their side. She looked at Yi Hongyu's wounds and frowned in sympathy. She felt disgusted by Ning Kei's words. Yi Hongyu did not react. She said calmly, "He has no teeth. I was bitten by him, so I can be sure." Ning Kei lowered his head and said, "Dirty and smelly saliva is also troublesome." Emo Shanshan could not help but interrupt weakly, "Don't you two think it's disgusting to talk like that?" Ning Kei and Yi Hongyu raised their heads at the same time and looked at her as if they were looking at a pure and innocent rabbit. Then, they shook their heads at the same time. They both felt that girls like Emo Shanshan, who had never experienced truly disgusting things, were so blessed that it was infuriating. Yi Hongyu continued to discuss with Ning Kei, "Taoism is based on the power of light. You don't have to worry about the poison hiding in your muscles and bones and causing trouble in the future." Ning Kei took out the needle and thread, looked at her and said seriously, "Suturing the wound is the fastest. The problem is that the old monk has bitten off too much of your flesh. If you use this kind of sealing treatment, there may be 2 pits on your shoulders and arms in the future." Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and said impatiently, "So what if I did?" Ning Kei shook his head and said while threading, "It doesn't look good to leave a hole. I thought you would care about this." Yi Hongyu said scornfully, "Only those mortals care about this. Ning-Kei looked down at the bloody hole on her shoulder and thought about where to start. He said casually, "You have such a good figure and like to wear cool red dresses. It always looks weird that there are two pits on your naked body. Even if you don't care about it, you have to think about the Divine Hall. You, the Tao addict, are the spokesperson of the Divine Hall. It's good to be beautiful. From now on, I will wear a Taoist robe," Yi Hongyu said. Then, after a moment of silence, she suddenly lifted a piece of flesh on the edge of the bloody hole on her shoulder and pressed it back. She asked in a low voice, "Will the pit be smaller if I sew it like this? Who in the world would not love a beautiful girl, even if she was the Tao addict?" Ning-Kei did not notice the hidden meaning in her tone and naturally did not take this opportunity to mock her. His eyes were all attracted by her fingers and movements. His fingers that were holding the needle trembled slightly. There were not many people in this world who could be so calm after being bitten by a ghost-like old monk. She could even turn the hanging flesh back, as if it was not her own body. Ning-Kei knew that she must have been in pain, but he did not see a trace of pain on her face. So he was shocked and even regretful. He had not met someone as ruthless as himself for a long time. Should he not care about anything else and kill her first when he met such a person? Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "Don't go soft." Ning-Kei could not help but sigh. He thought to himself that if he did not go soft, she would have been stabbed to death. The thin needle pierced through the white and tender skin, passing through the scattered flesh, and then came back again, carrying the thread through the girl's delicate shoulder and sewing. Yi Hongyu watched quietly and did not cry out in pain, but her beautiful face became paler and paler. Emo Shanshan squatted on the other side of Yi Hongyu and tightly pursed her thin lip. She frowned as she watched Ning-Kei raise and drop the needle in his hand. She subconsciously held Yi Hongyu's hand tightly and wanted to pass her strength to her so that she could hold on. In the dark room of the Devil's Hall, the three most outstanding young people in the cultivation world had paid a terrible price to overthrow the most outstanding powerhouse of the previous generation. They squatted in the corner like three injured mice, healing each other, protecting each other and giving each other strength. It was as if they had long forgotten that they had fought each other in the fields. It was finally over. The two terrifying holes on Yi Hongyu's body were no longer bleeding. The filthy flesh had also been removed. Her face was abnormally pale, but her eyes were unusually bright. She had no intention of fainting to escape the pain. Ning-Kei kept the needle and thread and happened to meet her bright eyes when he raised his head. He could not help but feel moved. He was very curious about how she had managed to forcefully rise up and successfully turn the situation around when she had been completely subdued by the old monk. At that time, he had been in that mysterious state and only knew the result but not the process. Yi Hongyu knew what he wanted to ask when she saw his gaze. In fact, she was also very confused. What had Ning-Kei realized in that state? The sword marks on the stone wall were left by Mr. Ku. Could it be that this guy had been lucky enough to inherit Mr. Ku's Howren sword? Both of them were confused and curious, but neither of them asked. That was because they were not sure if they could get the real answer from each other. They were even more unwilling to tell each other their own answers. Emo Shanshan and Yi Hongyu leaned against the stone wall to rest. It would still take a long time for them to completely recover from their injuries and physical weakness. Ning-Kei's injuries were the lightest and he did not have much mental problems. He walked towards the field. The mountain of corpses had long been turned into ruins by the impact of the aura. He walked in with difficulty and looked at the pile of ashes that the old monk had turned into. He shook his head in silence. He did not know how to evaluate Lotus 32 Petals, a peerless powerhouse who possessed both Taoism and Devil's powers. Thinking back to the time when this person could stand shoulder to shoulder with youngest uncle, he was one of the few people who stood in the world, who knew how much light was waiting for him in front of him. However, this person's choice was so crazy and even unreasonable. Standing beside the pile of ashes, Ning Ke raised his eyes and looked around. He looked at the mottled sword marks on the stone wall and thought about how he had inherited youngest uncle's mantle. A sense of grandeur rose in his chest and abdomen. He wanted to expel the inexplicable feelings that he had after joining the devil and the death of Lotus had brought to him. At this moment, the inexplicable sadness that he had felt when he had just woken up surged into his body again. He subconsciously looked at a stone wall and for some reason, he felt a pang of sorrow. He did not know that the wall faced the south. After a while, he shook his head to get rid of this inexplicable emotion. When he turned back to look at the pile of ashes on the ground, he had some other feelings, especially when he recalled the feelings and the incomprehensible fragmented information that the old monk had sent to him in the spiritual world before his death. He increasingly felt that the ashes on the ground were filled with a sense of pity. It has nothing to do with the grudges of the predecessors. No matter what, we were acquaintances, even though it was not a pleasant acquaintance. After all, you are a senior who once commanded the wind and rain in the world. You have to have a place to stay after your death. Ning Ke searched among the broken bones around him and found an inconspicuous iron box. It was probably a relic of a powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine. He opened the box and found that it was empty inside. This is quite suitable. Even though it is a little small, it can only contain a part of you. He squatted beside the pile of ashes that Master Lotus had turned into and spread his hands. Then, he casually picked up a large piece of white leg bone and swept the ashes into the iron box. His actions were very casual, as if he was sweeping away rubbish. He had come to the depths of the wilderness under the orders of his sect and waited for the right time for the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine to open. He wanted to enter to search for the tomes of arcane. However, who would have thought that he would not die after crossing swords and arrows, nor would he be able to stop the stone array tactics? Instead, he had met an old monster in the Devil's Doctrine that everyone thought had died decades ago. He had heard countless shocking stories of the past and struggled in agony between life and death countless times. In the end, he had survived miserably. As the most outstanding figure of the younger generation in the cultivation world, his mind was naturally unusually firm. However, after experiencing so many things, the three of them naturally had less desire to fight for the tomes of arcane. Ning Ke had inherited the mantle of youngest uncle. He was very satisfied to be able to bring the aura that had been away from home for a long time back to the academy. Yi Hongyu had been seriously injured both physically and mentally. She needed to find a place to rest and recuperate. She, who had come to the wilderness under the orders of her master to seek defeat, had finally been completely defeated. Moreover, she had found the only chance to win through her own willpower and determination. She was also very satisfied to be able to obtain such rare and precious experience and feelings. Mo Shanshan had cracked the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine and understood the array intent of the Great Blockage Formation. She had gained a lot. More importantly, she had finally bravely said those words to Ning Ke before the shadow of death. Even though both she and Ning Ke had forgotten about that moment, in fact, she was the one who was the most satisfied among the three. The following is a separate chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 302. Ning Ke lowered his head and tidied up the luggage scattered on the ground. He asked, "Can you walk?" Mo Shanshan's face was thinner than usual, which made her look more delicate. She smiled bitterly. Yi Hongyu leaned against the wall tiredly and frowned. It was obvious that she could not walk. The main reason was that they were seriously injured, but there was another important reason why they were struggling to walk: hunger. Their empty stomachs couldn't even make a sound at this point. Ning Ke sighed and said, "Why are we so hungry? How many days have we been unconscious?" Mo Shanshan shook her head and said, "I don't know." Ning Ke's palm landed on his abdomen and pressed down gently. He paused for a moment and said, 4 days. Emo Shanshan squinted her eyes to see him more clearly. She asked in confusion, You know that already? Yi Hongyu, who had been silent all this while, suddenly interrupted and asked, Are you always hungry? Ning Ke was unpacking his luggage again. When he heard her question, he replied casually, I may not be as good as you and many others in terms of state, but no one in this world has more experience of enduring hunger than me. Yi Hongyu said scornfully, I don't know where your disgusting self-confidence comes from. You actually dare to talk about starvation. That is because you have not experienced a childhood like mine. Ning Ke was furious to be questioned by a Hautian Taoism girl who had grown up in luxury. He scolded her, How would a woman like you know what it was like during the drought? Yi Hongyu smiled mockingly and was about to say something. Emo Shanshan sighed and looked at the two of them helplessly. She said, Is this worth fighting over? Ning Ke did not continue reminiscing about his childhood. He used facts to prove that his memory and fear of hunger were stronger than Yi Hongyu's, because he had successfully found some food from his luggage. There was always a small mountain of luggage beside him. When the big black horse was present, the big black horse would carry it on his back. When the big black horse was not present, he would carry it on his back. No matter how dangerous the Tianqi Mountains were, no matter what kind of danger they faced, he would never abandon his luggage. That was because he was very clear about the importance of stocking up. There were medicines, weapons, and sleeping bags that he had researched himself in the luggage. Of course there would be food. Yi Hongyu leaned against the wall and watched the guy take things out of his luggage, as if he was moving. There was a strange look in her eyes. When she saw the slender black arrow case, the strange look in her eyes became more intense. It was the arrow in the box that had crippled Long Qing. These terrifyingly powerful arrows had caused her great suffering outside the mountain gate. She did not know which sect in the world could actually cultivate arrows, nor could she remember when such a powerful arrow had appeared. She had been obsessed with Taoism all her life, so she was shocked and confused. She wanted to ask Ning Ke about it, but she knew that it must be his trump card to save his life, so she could not ask. Ning Ke passed a piece of jerky and a small water bag to her and said, The meat of the desolate man is better than the jerky in the army. Eat it with water, but don't eat too much. Chew slowly. After saying this, he walked to Emo Shanshan and sat down beside her. He tore the jerky into shreds and passed it to her. Emo Shanshan smiled and shook her head. She tried to raise her weak arms to eat by herself. Ning Ke shook his head and insisted on feeding her the shredded meat. Then, he raised the water bag and fed her a few mouthfuls of water. Yi Hongyu did not notice the movement beside her. She was staring at the hard jerky in her hands in a daze. She had experienced many hardships and seen many tragic things in her life. Logically speaking, there should not be any problems that she could not overcome. However, looking at the jerky and feeling the feeling in her fingers, she thought of the dried corpse in the White Bone Mountain. She thought of the Divine Lord Lotus's corpse-like fingers and cold, dry lips. She frowned slightly and stared at the jerky in front of her as if she was staring at a heavenly book. After some time, she took a deep breath and put the jerky into her mouth. Then, she chewed mechanically. After eating, drinking, and resting for a while, the three of them recovered some energy and prepared to leave. At this moment, a new problem appeared. They did not know if it was because the confinement array had been broken or for some other reason, but the tunnel that they used to enter the Devil's Hall had completely collapsed. With their current physical strength, they could not force their way through. Ning Ke looked at the stone mountain that blocked the tunnel. After thinking for a while, he turned around and walked towards the stone wall opposite him. There were 2 iron chains deeply embedded in the stone wall. In the past decades, these 2 iron chains had locked Master Lotus here, causing him to suffer a rare pain and torture. However, now that the confinement had been broken and Lotus was dead, the iron chains only had some rust on them. The aura of the talisman had long dissipated, and they had become the most ordinary iron chains. Ning Ke held the iron chains with both hands and took a deep breath. He secretly released the aura deep in his abdomen and used all his strength to pull. With a loud bang, the stone wall collapsed and revealed a deep tunnel behind it. Yi Hongyu and Mo Shanshan supported each other and walked behind him. Yi Hongyu looked at the deep tunnel that seemed to have no end. She frowned slightly and asked, "How did you know that there was a tunnel behind that wall?" "I guessed," Ning Ke answered matter-of-factly. In fact, it was a vague feeling in his mind that he could discover that there was a tunnel behind the iron chains and the stone wall. He did not know where this feeling came from. He silently thought that it could be the effect of the information that Master Lotus had sent to his sense of perception before he died. The Devil's Doctrine is a place where one can only enter but not leave. To be more precise, after the Devil's Doctrine was destroyed, a kind of inhibition appeared and only left one exit. I believe that there are countless of such tunnels that will eventually lead to the same place. The feeling in his mind appeared again, and Ning Ke subconsciously said this. Then, he was slightly shocked and fell into a long silence as he looked at the tunnel in front of him. At this moment, he finally understood that regardless of whether he could understand the information that Lotus had sent to him, it would appear and tell him what he should do when needed. A piercing chill took over Ning Ke's body. He looked at the deep tunnel in a daze and did not know what to say. What kind of state would be able to leave behind such a method? What exactly were those incomprehensible information fragments? Was it Lotus' impression of the world or the cultivation method of the Devil's Doctrine? What would these bring to him? Yi Hongyu looked at his back and was a little shocked at his knowledge. No one in the Divine Hall should know that the Devil's Doctrine had such a strange setup, but he did. However, she naturally thought that it was the knowledgeable and omniscient headmaster who had told Ning Ke these secrets of the Devil's Doctrine. She completely did not connect it to the dead Divine Lord Lotus. The four sides of the tunnel were made of stones and looked extremely sturdy. It was deep and very dark. Under the circumstances where there was no light source, it was very difficult for the three of them to walk, even with their eyesight. Along the way, they passed by a few forks. The three of them tried to pick a random one and realized that their luck had finally improved. They actually did not go the wrong way. Standing in front of the cliff outside the tunnel, Ning Ke smiled bitterly as he looked at the bottomless fog beneath his feet. He thought to himself that this was not luck at all. It was obvious that there was an old ghost who loved to eat humans in the dark that was giving him directions. The fog was very deep, and they did not know what was below them. Judging from the distance that they had walked in the tunnel, the three of them should still be in the Tianqi Mountains. Ning Ke tied the heavy luggage on his body tighter and pointed to a tripwire that seemed to be in disrepair at the edge of the cliff. He said, "If you are not afraid, then we should go up." After the long tunnel, there was a long noose. The basket that was hung under the long rope was not big, but it was more than enough to fit the three of them. Listening to the sound of the wind whistling past the basket and seeing the fog that was within reach, the three of them gradually relaxed their vigilance. There was a faint light in front of the fog. Ning Ke opened his mouth slightly and vaguely guessed that he had finally left the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He could not help but smile happily. Mo Shanshan sat quietly beside him and looked at him and smiled. Yi Hongyu used her fingers to gently comb her hair that was messed up by the mountain wind. She looked at the unfocused but focused look in Mo Shanshan's eyes and looked at Ning Ke, who was too happy to notice her. She could not help but laugh coldly. Adulterer! Although her voice was very soft, it was extremely clear in this quiet world where there was no one else except for the fog. Ning Ke suddenly became extremely embarrassed and angry. He did not care that they were running for their lives together and wanted to fight with her with all his might. Mo Shanshan was slightly embarrassed but not angry. She looked at Yi Hongyu and explained very seriously, "I like him, but I know that he doesn't like me enough. So I can't say that we are adulterer for now." Yi Hongyu was slightly stunned. She did not expect that a woman like the calligraphy addict would become a fierce woman once she fell in love. She could not help but sigh regretfully but could not say anything. As for Ning Ke, apart from squinting his eyes against the cold mountain wind and trying to catch the shapeless clouds outside the basket to pretend that he was still a naive child who could not understand what they were talking about, what else could he do at this moment? No one knew what the powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine had used to set up such a long ropeway in the inaccessible Tianqi Mountains. When the basket slowly touched the ground, it was already a long time later. Ning Ke jumped out of the basket and looked back. The two girls stood beside him and looked back at the same time. The fog in the mountain gradually dissipated, and he could clearly see the end of a very thin black line. It was a lonely and proud snow-capped peak. They had come down from that snow-capped peak. It was believed that they would never want to return to that snow-capped peak. Ning Ke looked at the unworldly snow-capped peak where the Devil's Doctrine was and could not help but shake his head. He reached into the basket and wanted to take out his luggage. However, he did not expect to touch a soft and smooth little ball of meat. He looked at the little white dog in his hands in shock and wondered where this little thing came from. He had been frightened enough these few days. Please don't be some elder of the Devil's Doctrine. Please don't be the ghost of Master Lotus. I really wanted to write an entire chapter about the scene on the ropeway, to watch the scenery and talk about the past. This is what one should do in their youth. This is the time worth remembering before people fight in the future, just like Yen Sei and Guangming. However, people said that it was too long, so I could only hold back my tears and not write it. I have something to do in the afternoon. The next chapter will probably be at night. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 303. The little white dog was very obedient and adorable. It looked at Ning Ke innocently with its watery eyes. Ning Ke stared at it blankly as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Suddenly, the little white dog's watery eyes revealed a hint of pride. It opened its mouth abruptly and revealed its short but sharp teeth. It bit at Ning Ke's wrist with such force that it seemed like it was going to bite off his hand. The innocent and adorable little white dog had turned into a ferocious and terrifying wolf cub in the next moment. It bit at Ning Ke's wrist at an extremely fast speed, especially when it closed its teeth. It was so fast that it could not be seen with the naked eye. It was almost as fast as lightning. If Ning Ke was bitten, his flesh and bones would definitely be broken. This sudden attack was insidious and sudden. If it was an ordinary person, they would not be able to escape the lightning-fast bite. However, Ning Ke had been dealing with dangerous prey all his life. He was the most sensitive to the movements of these beasts and the most alert to the dangers in the forest. How could he fall for this trick? When his fingertips touched the dog's neck, he felt a slight build-up of strength. He reacted and shoved his right hand into the little white dog's mouth. Then, he mercilessly went in, as if he wanted to shove his entire arm into the little white dog's stomach. Then, his fingers found a soft piece of meat in the sticky mess and pinched hard. The little white dog let out a stifled howl. Everything from its mouth to its throat was stuffed, leaving no space for it to move. How could it still bite down? The intense pain in the depths of its throat caused its round body to tremble violently. Saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth, making it look extremely pitiful. Ning Ke raised his left hand in the air and shook his head at the drooling little white dog, whose eyes were already red from fighting. He had hunted countless beasts in Min Mountain and encountered countless dangers. However, he was forced to use such a risky move when his prey was so close to his mouth. He had only used it once when he met the wolf pack when he was young. Emo Shanshan and Yi Hongyu looked away from the snow-capped peak and were shocked by the scene. Ning Ke raised his arm high with a little white dog dangling from the tip of his arm. Half of his arm was completely submerged in the little white dog's mouth. It looked like he was holding a white torch, or an iron rod piercing through his prey, and preparing to roast it. The prey was still alive and drooling, so the scene was a little ridiculous. Where did the dog come from? Emo Shanshan asked with a slight frown. I don't know either. Ning Ke looked up at the little white dog in front of his arm. The wet and sticky feeling on his arm did not move him at all. He looked at the pitiful and struggling expression in its eyes and could not help but be slightly moved. He felt that this little thing seemed to be able to understand human nature, just like the big black horse or the big white goose second brother raised. Yi Hongyu looked at the snow-white puppy warily but did not say anything. Ning Ke looked at the snow-white fur of the little white dog and thought of something. He sighed and said, I have always wanted to raise a beautiful Samoyed, but never had the chance. I didn't expect to meet you. Emo Shanshan did not understand what a Samoyed was, but she could not help but sympathize with Ning Ke for being too cruel when she saw the little white dog kicking its hind legs in pain and drooling. She said, then raise it. Yi Hongyu laughed coldly and pinched a Taoist formula behind her back. She looked indifferently at the back of the mountain path. Ning Ke used his empty left hand to rub the head of the little white dog and found that he felt a familiar and intimate aura from it. He could not help but frown. He thought to himself that youngest uncle's legacy was in the front gate of the devil's doctrine, so he felt close and familiar. But what was with this dog? Could it be youngest uncle's pet? There was a human arm in its mouth, and its stomach could even taste human flesh, but it couldn't bite it down. It couldn't even lick it to satisfy its craving. The little white dog was in extreme pain, and the soft piece of flesh that was pinched deep in its throat made it feel an extreme sense of fear and obedience. The little white dog looked at Ning Ke with its watery eyes, showing signs of begging and submission. It did not mind submitting to this human's aura. As for the reason why its eyes were so watery, it was because it was in too much pain. Don't look at me like that, it will make me struggle. Ning Ke looked at the little white dog and sighed. Although I really want to raise a Samoyed, and you have also expressed your willingness to be adopted by me, I can only say that Haotian's fated chance is too cruel. I am too hungry now, and in my eyes, you are more like a pot of fragrant dog meat. He used his left hand to pull out the padao from the scabbard and held it in his mouth, preparing to kill the dog and disembowel it. He continued to comfort it with a muffled voice, eating is more important than Haotian. If someone like Master Lotus wants to live, he has to eat human flesh every day, so what if we eat a few pieces of dog meat? He suddenly remembered that this seemingly cute little thing was the easiest to deceive young girls. He had forgotten to ask for the two girls' opinions. He took down the padao with one hand and held the dog with the other, saying, we need live food. Emo Shanshan could not bear to watch and turned around. Yi Hongyu's eyes flashed with excitement and asked, do you do this often? Ning Ke waved the padao and said proudly, don't talk about killing dogs, I got tired of eating wolves in Min Mountain. When the little white dog that was suspended in his hand heard this, it realized that this fellow was actually a bloodthirsty pervert who dared to eat wolf meat. It was instantly scared out of its wits and lost its last hope. Its soft body stiffened like a block of wood. Ning Ke did not care whether the little white dog was as gentle as a cat or as stiff as a rock. He had eaten everything in his life, and he did not believe in the idiotic theory that prey would secrete poison to make the meat unpalatable due to fear before it died. He picked up the padao and started to skim the little white dog's head. After all, Sang Sang did not like him killing cubs after he killed the old hunter, so he needed to familiarize himself with the physiological structure of the other party. At this moment, an extremely angry roar suddenly sounded from the rope that was hidden behind the thin fog. Because of the long distance and the rapid approach of the voice, the clear and angry voice was compressed into an even sharper voice. Who dare move me? When the clear and angry voice sounded, it was obvious that the person was still far away in the depths of the valley. When the word move was said, the person was already in the clouds diagonally above them. When the word "of" was said, the person was already very close to the three people on the ground. The clouds were disturbed and a large area was broken in an instant. Then, like a stone falling from the sky, a figure jumped down from the rope diagonally above and jumped towards Ning Kei's position. Ning Kei carried the little white dog and looked back into the fog. He looked at the graceful figure that was so fast that it did not seem like a mortal. He was stunned and thought, could a fairy really fall from the sky? However, when the old leather boot expanded rapidly in his field of vision and approached his face with the terrifying sound of the wind, he finally understood that it was not a fairy that fell from the sky, but someone who wanted to kill him. There was a whistling sound of a sword. Yi Hongyu had been on guard against the appearance of the person and had secretly accumulated her psyche power for a long time. Just as the figure was about to hit Ning Kei, she released the Taoist formula and an invisible sword style pierced towards the figure. The person who jumped down from the fog snorted and made a cross with his fists in front of him. He had actually used his own body to forcefully block Yi Hongyu's sword that she had been preparing for a long time. His body suddenly somersaulted a dozen times and then landed heavily on the ground. With a muffled hum, the valley was filled with dust and dust. The dust gradually settled and the figure of the person was revealed. It was a little girl wearing a fur coat. She wore an animal skin hat on her head and a beast's tail was wrapped around her collar. Judging from her figure and the exposed eyes, she was definitely still very young. Two extremely long black braids hung down behind her and swayed gently. She knelt on the ground on one knee and there was a deep pit on her knee. However, there was no pain on her face. Both her knee and her petite body were as stable as a mountain, and it was impossible to tell whether she was injured or not. The little white dog in Ning Kei's hand struggled violently the moment it saw the little girl. Ning Kei did not have the patience to pay attention to it at this moment and shook it hard a few times, almost causing it to roll its eyes. He focused all his attention on the little girl who knelt on the ground on one knee and was dumbfounded by what he saw. He could not understand how someone in this world dared to jump from such a high place and use her arms to block Yi Hongyu's sword and fall to the ground pathetically without any injury. After a while, the little girl stood up. Her two thick and long black braids swayed again with her movements. She looked at Yi Hongyu and her clear eyes that were not covered by the beast's tail revealed a shocked and puzzled expression. "What happened to you in the front gate? How did your power drop so much? I clearly saw that you had entered the knowing destiny state on the snow cliff. Why are you only at the see-through state now?" Yi Hongyu's face was slightly pale and her lips curled into a self-mocking smile. However, she did not answer the other party's question. Ning Kei glanced at her. He had many doubts during the painful battle with Master Lotus in the Devil's Hall and had vaguely guessed a possibility. It was only now that he had received confirmation from the little girl. He could not help but be shocked as he finally understood that Yi Hongyu had paid such a painful price. Positive emotions such as shock, gratitude and admiration had never stayed in his mind for too long. Ning Kei could tell that the little girl who had fallen from the sky obviously had a grudge against the Tao addict. Naturally, he would not stand at the front and bear the brunt. He silently walked behind Yi Hongyu. His movements were so casual and natural that it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Yi Hongyu looked at the little girl indifferently and said to the two people beside her, "This demoness from the Devil's Doctrine is called Tang Xiaotang. Don't think that she is easy to deal with just because she is young. If the Devil's Doctrine had not been destroyed back then, she would have been the saintess of this generation. This girl does not dare to fight with me face to face. She is very cunning." Tang Xiaotang was already angry when she heard her mention the pursuit in the Tianqi Mountains. She retorted angrily, "If you did not use those dirty tricks, I would have fought with you." Yi Hongyu smiled slightly and did not want to continue the discussion. However, this attitude made Tang Xiaotang feel even more angry and unfair. The little girl's face that was exposed outside the beast's tail started to blush. Ning Ke had heard that the other party was the demoness from the devil's doctrine. However, he did not think that there was anything demonic about her except for her demonic abilities. Looking at the little girl's blushing face, innocent eyes and long black braids, he suddenly felt that he had heard someone describe such a girl before. However, he could not remember where. The situation on the monthly votes list is a little tense. If you have extra monthly votes in your account, please support us. Thank you very much. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 304. This title doesn't mean that I'm not a serious person. I never do serious things. It's just that the things I'm going to talk about today are more serious. First of all, the simplified version of Shoegaze had been officially published. Moreover, it had started to be widely distributed. Of course, those who had read it would know that it was a very good novel. If everyone wanted to read it on paper, they might as well buy the original version. Those who haven't read it should subscribe to the electronic version first. Then buy the original version and read it in bed. I'm a serious person who never lies. It's really good. The Xinhua bookstores should be putting it on the shelves now. Dangdang Zhuiyue and Taobao have also officially started selling it. When I have some time in a few days, I'll sort it out. I'll post it in the book review section or a single chapter. It's actually very easy to search for it. I know that many readers have already gotten the first episode of Rising Tide. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude and remind everyone to make sure that it's published by Wuhan Publishing House. Don't buy pirated copies. Also, don't forget to give it 5 stars and give it a good review. Don't worry, Taiwanese friends. Rising Tide will be released soon. I'll show off then. Then, about the time. Tomorrow is Saturday. I'll keep my good tradition and take a vacation. Don't sigh and laugh at me. I'm not the kind of person who has to show off. I'll take a day off tomorrow. In fact, I'll have to write at night. I'll return to Hubei the day after tomorrow, which is the 6th. I won't be able to write if I'm delayed on the road. I'll be very busy these days to ensure that there will be more updates on the 7th. I'll do my best to write. If I can't, I'll let everyone know. I'm most worried about the cat and dog. I'll entrust the dog to my friend, Dr. Jiang. I'll also entrust him to feed the cat at home every 2 days. It seems that Little Black's weight loss plan is within reach. I'll thank him here. My leader can only stay in Hubei for 3 days. It's very tiring. I'm sure she'll be exhausted. Her plan, for my annual party and work, she'll have to put in a lot of effort. I'll thank her here. Let me thank you very seriously. In the past, I loved and wanted to avoid the monthly votes list. One of the reasons was that this matter could easily cause gossip and unhappiness. However, my dears have voted so many monthly vote. You are as nervous as I am, but you are so gentle and lovely that you do not criticize other books and authors. It wasn't easy to keep my emotions in a state of excitement and moderation. Of course, I also have to thank the other book friends. No matter if it's the Fatty Ear Root, the Shota Tomato, or the Uncle Moongate, they're all so gentle and considerate to me. I blew a kiss. Thank you, everyone. I hope that no matter what happens to the votes, we can still be happy. Let us go on living decently, not decently. Let us all go on writing seriously and reading irregularly. Finally, let me say something serious. I'm trying to get monthly vote. If you still have monthly votes, please vote for Nightfall. Right now, both I and this book need your support. The fat but not lazy serious cat waved his paw and saluted. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 305. Tang Xiaotang looked at the 3 people in front of her and scratched her head in distress. She felt very troublesome. She followed her brother outside the front gate and watched the 3 people enter the Holy Land. Then she lost track of them. She did not expect to meet them in the valley, and it was obvious that the three were no longer enemies. Although she was confident that she was not weaker than them, she did not think that she was strong enough to fight against the Tao addict, the calligraphy addict, and the core disciples of the headmaster. When they left the Holy Land and passed through the long and complicated passageways, Little White, who had been following her, suddenly went missing. She searched for it for a long time and finally jumped down with the hope of being lucky. Unexpectedly, she heard someone talking about how to kill Little White and eat it. Her joy was immediately replaced by anger. She was hot-headed and jumped down without caring that she was high up in the sky. Then she was attacked by Yi Hongyu's Taoist sword. For reasons unknown to her, Yi Hongyu had inexplicably fallen from the knowing destiny state to the see-through state. That attack did not really hurt her, but her body, which had inherited the bloodline of the desolate, was very strong. After all, she was not a stone. She still suffered internal injuries from jumping from such a high place, but it could not be seen on the surface. Tang Xiaotang shuddered. Only now did she understand the danger she had been in earlier. She had almost fallen to her death. She thought that if her brother knew that she was so muddle-headed, he would be very angry. She subconsciously pulled down the animal hat on her head and stuck out her tongue in fear. Her little face looked even more adorable. It seems that you have encountered a lot in the Holy Land. The Holy Land is our Holy Land. It is not a place where you outsiders can enter. I won't bully you because you are injured. Don't bully me because I am outnumbered. Tang Xiaotang thought that her hasty decision was very smart. Anyway, she was going to Chang'an to be the disciple of the headmaster of the academy. She could not kill Ningquebec. She said with a childish voice, "The road is facing the sky. Let's go our separate ways." Ning Ke stood behind Yi Hongyu and said before she could speak, "Heroine is right. Let's say goodbye." He was very clear about the real situation of the three of them. They had been tortured by the old monk who ate human flesh for such a long time. No matter if they were the calligraphy addict or the Tao addict, they were now very weak. How could they fight with a girl from the Devil's Doctrine who was full of vitality? Only an idiot would make such a choice. The girl from the Devil's Doctrine looked very cute, but Ning Ke wanted to stay as far away from her as possible. On one hand, it was because of the threat brought by her powerful strength. More importantly, it was because of the stories that Master Lotus told, and what he had done. It made him feel an inexplicable fear towards the Devil's Doctrine. Even if he had joined the Devil, it did not mean that he would naturally be close to the people from the Devil's Doctrine. It was just like how youngest uncle joined the Devil's Doctrine in the past, but he still destroyed the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Seeing that Tang Xiaotang was about to speak, Ning Ke gradually relaxed, but his body was still tense. He subconsciously clenched his right hand behind his back, but he forgot that his right hand was stuffed into the little white dog's throat. His fingers tightened, and the little white dog suddenly felt as if it had been struck by lightning, struggling and letting out a weak whine. Tang Xiaotang, who was about to leave, was startled when she heard the weak and miserable cry of a dying person calling for their loved ones. Then, she came back to her senses and hid her head in annoyance. She thought that she must have fallen too hard just now and was confused. She almost forgot why she took the risk to jump down. She looked at the three of them and said while suppressing her anger, "Return Little White to me, and I will leave." Yi Hongyu looked back at Ning Ke expressionlessly and then walked to the side. Ning Ke glared at her and raised his right hand. He looked at Tang Xiaotang and said, "Is this your dog? No wonder it's so cute. I was wondering how there could be such a dog in such a remote valley. So it's the sacred dog of the Devil's Doctrine." The little white dog looked miserable when it was raised into the air. Its mouth was wide open, and saliva mixed with blood dripped from it. Its abdomen rose and fell slightly, and it looked at its owner pitifully and helplessly. Its eyes had turned red from the struggle. Tang Xiaotang looked at it. How could she still listen to Ning Ke's flattery? Her clear eyes were filled with endless anger, and then gradually turned red. A strong wind blew, and a heavy sound of impact was heard. Smoke and dust gradually fell. Tang Xiaotang glared at Ning Ke, who was leaning against the smooth stone surface of the valley, and shouted angrily, "I'm going to kill you!" Ning Ke's arm was in so much pain that he could not lift it. He did not know how many pieces of his bones had been smashed by the little girl's fist. At this moment, he finally believed Yi Hongyu's words. This siren from the Devil's Doctrine was indeed terrifying. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Tang Xiaotang and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I gave in to you, so we're even. If you still want to fight, don't blame me for being rude. Is the Enlightenment doctrine that great? I'm the successor of the headmaster of the academy." It was obvious that the title of the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy was not as useful to the angry girl from the Devil's Doctrine as it was to the people from the Divine Hall or the Buddhism sect. Tang Xiaotang did not react at all. Mo Shanshan stood beside Ning Ke and quietly looked at the little girl who was gradually approaching. Yi Hongyu glanced at Ning Ke with a smile, and then stood further away. Ning Ke looked at Mo Shanshan and shook his head. He said, "You're already in this state. Save your strength." Mo Shanshan said softly, "Am I supposed to watch you be beaten to death because of a dog? How can a person like me be beaten to death by a little girl? This kind of death has never been in my consideration." Ning Ke stood up with the support of the stone wall. He held the tragic little white dog tightly in his hand and looked at Tang Xiaotang seriously. He said, "If you dare to take another step forward, I'll strangle this broken dog of yours to death." Tang Xiaotang's expression changed slightly. She stopped and said angrily, "How can you be so shameless?" Ning Ke looked at her and said seriously, "In my opinion, you're even more shameless to bully me when I'm injured. And you're really no match for us. The Tao addict is here. Since you couldn't beat her before, do you think you can beat her now? You don't have to rush to refute. Think about it carefully. Yes, she has indeed fallen from the knowing destiny state to the see-through state. But she was also in the see-through state when you lost to her." Tang Xiaotang frowned slightly. She felt that Ning Ke's words seemed to make sense, but it also seemed to make no sense at all. Ning Ke looked at her expression and added, after all, she had stayed in the knowing destiny state for a period of time and had the experience of a grand cultivator. Experience is very important in a battle. I guess you don't have this kind of experience? Tang Xiaotang shook her head and answered honestly, "Our Enlightenment doctrine is not divided into 5 states like Haotian Taoism. But my current state of strength has not reached the knowing destiny state that you speak of. The Devil's Doctrine did not have 5 states." Ning Ke was slightly stunned. He thought that his life in the future would be very bad and it would be easy for others to find out that he had joined the devil. He frowned and decided to deal with the problem in front of him first. "No matter what, you can't beat the Tao addict. You can't beat the 3 of us even if we fight together." Mo Shanshan smiled beside him and said, "I really can't beat her." Yi Hongyu said coldly from afar, "I can fight if I really want to, but why should I?" Ning Ke was very annoyed. He thought that there was no need to be so honest at this time. But looking at Mo Shanshan and Yi Hongyu's attitude, he knew that there should not be any real danger. So he looked at the girl from the Devil's Doctrine and said sincerely, "The most important thing is to be happy. I can understand your anger, but I hope that you can understand my injustice." He continued, "Although your dog was a little frightened, I can guarantee that it did not lose a piece of meat. I will put it down and return it to you now. I hope that you will not be hot-headed again, okay?" Tang Xiaotang looked at the little thing in his hand, and could not care so much anymore. She nodded hurriedly. Ning Ke pulled his hand out of the little white dog's mouth, and handed it over. Tang Xiaotang hugged Little White happily, and kept stroking its white fur to comfort it. Little White rubbed against her cheeks weakly, and then buried its head in the little girl's soft arms that had just started to develop. Ning Ke took a few steps back and praised, What a cute little dog. Tang Xiaotang explained seriously, Little White is a snow wolf, not a little dog. Ning Ke suddenly understood and said, So it is a little white wolf. At this moment, the little white wolf in the arms of the girl from the Devil's Doctrine secretly looked up at him. Its eyes were extremely vicious, as if it was saying that it would bite Ning Ke to death if there was a chance in the future. It is indeed a wolf cub. Ning Ke thought hatefully in his heart. If there was a chance in the future, he would definitely throw this wolf cub into the back of the mountain of the academy and let it have a taste of second brother's big white goose. Before Tang Xiaotang left, she said to the three of them, Even though there is only one path to leave the Holy Land, this valley was excavated by the previous sages of the Enlightenment doctrine. Thus, a few maze formations have been set up. Recently, there has been a lot of fog. When you go out, be careful. If you get lost, you may not be able to walk out. Emo Shanshan calmly bowed and said, Thank you for your reminder. If it was in the past, the young talisman master would definitely not hesitate to fight with the remaining evil of the Devil's Doctrine, especially such an important demoness. However, after coming from the Great River Kingdom in the south to the wilderness in the north and walking with Ning Ke for such a long time, especially after experiencing the matter of Master Lotus, she had a lot of new understanding of the difference between the Devil's Doctrine and Taoism. Naturally, she would not view things as she did in the past. Tang Xiaotang said, You are welcome. I just want to make this guy feel bad. That guy was naturally referring to Ning Quebec. He smiled and said, Why don't we go together? Tang Xiaotang looked at him and said proudly, You always say that the Enlightenment doctrine is the Devil's Doctrine and that Taoism and the Devil's Doctrine are irreconcilable. Why do you want me to take you away now? I want you to beg me. Why don't you beg me? Ning Ke said righteously, What are you talking about? The Academy has always been tolerant. The difference between Taoism and the Devil's Doctrine is more of a difference in ideas to the Academy. As for me, I have always admired the demeanor of the predecessors of the Enlightenment doctrine. Then, he became serious and said, Miss Tang, please take us with you. I beg you. I left home in the wee hours of the morning and spent the whole night riding. I'm on a plane now. If everything goes well, I can reach home in the evening. Today, the 2 chapters will be updated on time. The second chapter will be at 3 in the afternoon. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 306. The first sentence completely ignored the 1,000-year history of the bloody war between Taoism and the Devil's Doctrine, and even ignored the fact that the Devil's Doctrine was destroyed by Mr. Ku of the Academy. It was already extremely shameless, but it seemed to make some sense. Moreover, Ning Ke looked righteous and could still maintain the demeanor of a disciple of the Academy. However, the next sentence that followed after the awe-inspiring righteousness was so direct and straightforward. He asked for it without any hesitation or concealment. It was really shameless to the extreme. Tang Xiaotang looked at Ning Ke blankly. She did not expect that he would really beg her. She was even a little dazed. Was what her brother said true? Was he really a core disciple of the headmaster of the academy? Even Mo Shanshan, who already knew Ning Ke's temperament very well, felt a little hot on her face. She stood a little further away from Ning Ke with a trace of shame in her eyes. Yi Hongyu shook her head in disgust. As the only unknown place that connected the human world and the outside world, the academy was such a proud place. From the headmaster of the academy to Mr. Ku to Jun Mo, who would really look up to the Devil's Doctrine? Ning Ke was shameless enough to lie through his teeth. It seemed that the Academy's education without discrimination was not just a legend. Actually, Ning Ke did not need the girl from the Devil's Doctrine to lead him out of the Tianqi Mountains. With the incomprehensible aura and fragments left behind by Master Lotus, he might be able to follow his intuition and walk out. He had used this method to bring Mo Shanshan and Yi Hongyu out of the Devil's Doctrine. However, he did not want to try again, because finding the right path in those deep passages could be attributed to luck, but if he was lucky too many times, it would easily arouse suspicion. "Miss Tang, where are you going?" Ning Ke asked. Tang Xiaotang replied, "I'm going south." The south was a very broad concept, especially since they were in the bitterly cold Tianqi Mountains in the extreme north of the continent. No matter where they wanted to go, it seemed that they had to go south first. However, Tang Xiaotang spoke very seriously, and so did Ning Quebec. He even followed her words and spoke his own thoughts. "Eh? What a coincidence, we're also going south. So we're going the same way." As the saying goes, a chance encounter is better than an invitation. Shall we go together? The passageways leading to the outside of the mountains were stone valleys that were dug out by the masters of the Devil's Doctrine countless years ago. The stone walls were smooth and steep as if they were cut by a knife. Even an eagle would not be able to stop. No one knew how many years of wind, frost, rain, and snow had passed, but there was still no dust, so it was naturally impossible for there to be lush green grass. The Tao addict of the West Hill Divine Palace, the young girl of the Devil's Doctrine, the calligraphy addict of Mogan Mountain, and the weakest world wayfarer in the history of the Academy. The four of them walked silently in the narrow and long stone valley. Silence was not the right word. In my opinion, we, the young generation of the cultivation world, cannot repeat the mistakes of our seniors. Emo Shanshan's expression turned solemn as she asked, "What mistakes? Fighting as soon as we meet? What's the point of fighting? When I'm free, I'll hide in the mountains and cultivate. If I see him, I'll just greet him and chat. Isn't that better than anything else?" Yi Hongyu said coldly, "No fighting, no cultivation. I've always opposed this view, but I won't argue with a cultivation addict like you. If I have the chance to go to Chang and in the future, I'll treat you three to noodles." Noodles with fried eggs cooked by Sang Sang. Tang Xiaotang looked at his profile curiously and asked, "Who's Sang Sang?" "Sang Sang is my little handmaiden. You should know that the noodles made by Sang Sang are absolutely the best noodles in the world." Emo Shanshan looked at Ning Kei's haggard face, but when he mentioned a certain name, he would be in high spirits. She smiled slightly and did not say anything. However, she did not know why she felt a little empty in her heart and a little uneasy. Ning Kei looked at Tang Xiaotang and said seriously, "Even if we want to fight, let's not fight now. It'll be more magnificent if we fight outside. Speaking of which, in fact, my hatred for the West Hill Divine Palace is very deep, no less than yours." Speaking of this, he lowered his voice and looked at Yi Hongyu's back in front of him. He said, "Does Prince Long Qing know?" Tang Xiaotang was infected by his expression and her voice came out from the beast's tail. She whispered, "I know. I saw you shoot through him with one arrow. Your arrow is really powerful. You can still hit someone from so far away." Ning Kei said sincerely, "It's not as powerful as the Enlightenment Doctrine's skills. How dare you jump from such a high place?" Tang Xiaotang lowered her head shyly and said softly, "I was also confused at that time." Ning Kei pointed at Yi Hongyu's back and whispered, "Prince Long Qing was disabled by me. There's no reason for the West Hill Divine Palace not to take revenge on me. In fact, this woman has always wanted to kill me. However, I made an agreement with her in the Holy Land that we would only do it outside. So if we really fight outside the mountain, I can help you." Although he spoke softly, he did not deliberately hide it from anyone. After all, they were walking together in this secluded valley. There was no time for them to make any conspiracy or play the art of coordination. Yi Hongyu, who was walking in front, stopped and looked back at him. She said with slight anger, "Ning Kei, can you shut up? I really feel bad for the headmaster of the academy to accept you as a disciple. I'm sure that you will become the shame of the academy in the future." "There's no need for the future. I'm already the shame of the academy." Ning Kei answered with a smile. He was telling the truth. After the inexplicable fight with the Xie family of the South Jin Kingdom, He was ostracized and ignored by his fellow students in the academy for several months. He did not know how many times they had whispered about the shame of the academy. He had long learned to ignore it. Moreover, he never thought that it was a derogatory term. He was willing to do anything as long as he could keep Sang Sang alive. Since that was the case, it was no big deal for him to say some witty words to please the girl who was the most powerful among the four of them, and who did not seem to care about the academy and the headmaster of the academy. She was the girl from the Devil's Doctrine, who did not seem to care about the academy and the headmaster of the academy. As long as he wanted to, he could make all the soldiers and civilians in the city of Wei, Master Yen Sei, and His Majesty happy. Therefore, the girl from the Devil's Doctrine, Tang Xiaotang, was not surprised to be happy and laughed from time to time. "So you are the sister of the legendary Tang. It's an honor to meet you." Ning Ke recalled what Chun Pippi said on the first day in the back of the mountain of the academy. He was slightly shocked and then remembered more things, such as Chun Pippi's description of his dream lover. Therefore, he found that the girl from the Devil's Doctrine beside him looked more and more familiar. Except for her young age, she fit Chun Pippi's description perfectly. "Since you're going to the south, you should really go to Chang'an. It has nothing to do with the fried egg noodle I mentioned earlier. It's the most magnificent city in the world, and there are many interesting people living there. One of them I want to introduce to you. He's about the same age as me, but he entered the Knowing Destiny state a few years ago. Everyone says he's a real genius." Tang Xiaotang looked at Ning Ke with her clear eyes and said in surprise, "He entered the Knowing Destiny state at such a young age? Is there really such a person in the world? Is he more powerful than the Tao addict?" Hearing this, Yi Hongyu suddenly said, "That fatty's temperament is terrible, but his cultivation speed is extremely fast. It can only be said that Haotian is biased towards some people. If we really fight, he's no match for you." After a short pause, she looked at Ning Ke and asked, "How is he doing in the academy these years?" Ning Ke then remembered that Chen Pippi knew the Tao addict, and that every time this person was mentioned, the proud fatty would be scared like a quail. He scratched his head and answered, "Not bad." Hearing this answer, Yi Hongyu was silent for a long time and then said indifferently, "That's good." The four of them walked in the quiet and even a little dead stone valley. They were the most outstanding young people in the cultivation world. They came from different sects, had different ideologies, and even had deep hatred for each other. However, there was no bloody fight or intrigue. Perhaps it was because they had seen too much blood and conspiracy in front of the old monk in the depths of the snow-capped peak, or simply because they did not want to think about it on the way home because their youth was their companion. Youth was really a very beautiful thing. Whether they were obsessed with books, Taoism, power or money, they still retained some simple and pure parts of themselves and did not completely sink into the complicated affairs of the world like a quagmire. If there was only youth left in the world, no old and no decay, perhaps there would be fewer killings and disputes. If they were hot-blooded instead of cold-blooded, they would still fight but directly. Then the world would become much simpler and more beautiful. However, it was a pity that everyone would gradually grow old and become more worldly. There would be many more responsibilities on their shoulders, and those heavy responsibilities would make people bend their back. It would make people diligent in thinking but too lazy to feel. At the southernmost end of the vast Tianqi mountain, the gradually lower mountain range penetrated into the wilderness and then disappeared into the flat land north of the Hulun Sea. The caravan from the central plains had stayed here for a long time. The lake was almost completely frozen, but they still had no intention of leaving. The middle-aged man slowly raised the edge of his tall hat and looked at the distant snow-capped peak in the sky. He felt that there were people there. Were they from the Taoist temple? Logically speaking, when the Ming hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane appeared in the world, Haotian Taoism would not only send the young disciples like the Tao addict and Long Qing, hoping to snatch the Tomes of Arcane back. however, except for himself and the guy who was hiding somewhere in the world to cultivate 23-year cicada cultivation. Who else knew that the only exit after the Holy Land was sealed was in the north of the Hulun Sea? However, even if the Taoist temple sent a world wayfarer, he would not stop his plan. It was because he had been swinging back and forth between the Empire and the West Hill for too many years. He hated this feeling, so he decided to do something. As long as he had the tomes of Arcane, he could get real freedom. As one of the few powerful descendants of the Devil's doctrine in the world, the middle-aged man firmly believed in this legend. "Is it you who likes to carry a wooden sword?" The middle-aged man looked at the distant snow-capped peak and smiled contemptuously. He put the remaining half of the lamb leg back on the plate, took a silk handkerchief from his subordinate, and carefully wiped the oil stains between his fingers. Then he stood up. The soles of his shoes stepped on the freshly frozen lake of the Hulun Sea. The middle-aged man slowly walked toward the distant mountains across the lake. Every step he took was so solid that it seemed that he was going to shake the ice. He had many enemies in the world, and those enemies all knew that he did not know how to swim or even feared water. But today he had to step over the lake, as if he wanted to break through the grievances and dissatisfaction of the past years. The cold wind blew on his chest, and the middle-aged man felt as if he had returned to his youth. This feeling was very good. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 307. It was the middle of winter, and the cold wind was blowing in the vast Tianqi mountain. The temperature on the snow-capped peak was extremely low. Fortunately, the peak was too high and was not covered by the mist that permeated the valley between the foothills. The sun shone directly here. Although it did not bring much real warmth, it could bring some psychological comfort. Just as the middle-aged man by the Hulun Sea had guessed, there was indeed someone on the snow-capped peak that had not been seen for tens of thousands of years. It was a Taoist priest in a thin robe with an ebony fork in his hair bun. The Taoist priest looked calm and thin, carrying a wooden sword on his back. He quietly looked at the floating white clouds under the snow-capped peak, the barren wilderness under the white clouds, and the Hulun Sea that was like a white mirror. Yi Su, the world wayfarer from the Jishou Abbey, had made a bet with Tang, the world wayfarer from the Devil's Doctrine, on the two peaks outside the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. In the end, Ning Ke won, and Prince Long Qing was disabled. So, he lost. According to the bet that was not spoken but known to both of them, Yi Su could no longer participate in the fight for the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of Arcane. But this did not mean that he could not stand on the snow-capped peak and watch the show from afar. He saw the middle-aged man by the Hulun Sea, but in fact, he did not look at the middle-aged man. Because if he saw the middle-aged man could also see him. He came from the unworldly unknown place, but he knew very well that there were many real masters hidden in the world, such as the middle-aged man by the Hulun Sea. Even though he was powerful, he still had to be respectful and reserved to the masters at the peak of martial arts in the human world who were close to the divine transcendence. Of course, if he was still the proud lad with a wooden sword more than a decade ago, he would never care about these things. However, he was no longer the young him now. His understanding of the world and himself was already different. It was just that he would occasionally miss the compelling youth that had been far away for many years. One of the reasons why he was here was to see who would get the tomes of Arcane. However, he had grown up in the Jishou Abbey and started reading the 6 volumes of tomes of Arcane when he first learned to read. He did not have a sense of mystery and naturally did not have an inexplicable reverence for the tomes of Arcane like the mortals or cultivators in the world. Therefore, this was not the real reason why he was here. At least, it was not as important as the real reason. He had come here to reminisce about the youth that had been lost for many years. Perhaps he had come to pay tribute to the youth that had been lost for many years, or perhaps he had come to find the youth that had been lost for many years. That youth was called Pride. Yisu silently turned around and looked at a certain pool in the mountains. The pool was extremely small. Perhaps there was hot water gushing out from the bottom of the pool, so it had not been frozen for a few days. However, in the end, it could not withstand the biting cold wind, and a thin layer of ice had formed on the surface of the pool. Perhaps it was many days ago, or perhaps it was just a moment ago, but the thin ice on the surface of the small pond had a very small opening. Even he couldn't be sure when that piece of thin ice had been broken. But he could confirm that the shape of the opening on the surface of the pool was very special, like the trace left by a wooden dipper. 14 years ago, he had seen that wooden dipper and then he could never forget it. 14 years ago, the most mysterious Tian hand scroll of the 7 volumes of Tomes of Arcane showed an extremely important sign. However, the Taoist in the abbey who was responsible for looking after the Tomes of Arcane remained absolutely silent about it. The great divine priest of revelation of the West Hill Divine Palace entered the abbey to read the Tomes of Arcane and did not say much. However, no one had expected that the great divine priest of light, Wei Guangming, would take half a step into the divine domain of Tianqi at this time. His deep and pure eyes saw the shadow of the night descending on the world. This generation of world wayfarers of Taoism, Buddhism, and Diabolism gathered in the wilderness. At that time, the 3 world wayfarers were still 3 teenagers. They gathered under a small tree and silently watched the ants for a long time. Then they looked at the black line for a long time and finally left separately. At that time, Yi Su, the successor of the Jishou Abbey, was very proud and very confident. He scolded Tang as an evil spirit and disdained Qin Yan as an outsider. He chopped the small tree into 53,333 pieces with one stroke of his sword, and then recited a Taoist hymn that he was most satisfied with so far. At that time, he did not know that when the night was coming, on the other side of the black line that they did not dare to cross, there was a scholar wearing straw shoes and a shabby coat sitting calmly beside a small pond. He held a scroll in his hand and read happily. There was a wooden dipper hanging on his waist. When he was hungry or thirsty, he would drink from the pond. After that, he traveled around the world and went to the South Sea. He excitedly reported to his master. The Taoist in indigo on the reef looked at him and smiled sympathetically. At that time, he knew that there was a person sitting on the other side of the black line that day. So he could no longer be as proud and confident as before. Many years later, after experiencing the prosperity of the secular world, he succeeded in seeing through many things. So confidence naturally returned to him. However, the youth and pride of that year were no longer there. He had always regretted that he did not have the opportunity to ask the person on the other side of the line. Until today, it seemed that he finally had the opportunity. So there was no one by the small pond. Standing on the top of the snow-capped peak, he looked seriously at the pond on the mountainside. Both the ebony fork in his Taoist bun and the thin light shirt on his body were motionless in the cold wind, just like his clear Taoist heart at that moment. There was someone by the Hulun Sea outside the snow mountain. The middle-aged man looked at the shore in front of him and suddenly stopped. Then he took off the hat that he had worn for many days and revealed his face. He looked at the vast mountains in the distance. His thick eyebrows, which were like silkworms, slightly frowned. His red lips, which were like thick blood, slightly curled up, revealing a complicated smile. In the biting cold wind, he walked again from the frozen lake to the solid ground. His strong body, which was as strong as steel, completely ignored the existence of the strong wind in the wilderness. He walked northward with a murderous intent. He did not walk fast, and even a little slowly. Every time his foot fell, he would sink into the frozen ground of the wilderness, leaving a deep footprint. He left the Hulun Sea and walked to the foothills of Tianqi Mountain in the north. As time passed, the murderous aura on the middle-aged man gradually disappeared. The footprints he left behind became shallower and shallower until there was no trace left. He was not like those grand cultivators in the world who knew the destiny of the world and integrated himself with the heaven and earth. This was because he had never practiced Taoism. He used his terrifying psyche power to completely isolate his body and consciousness from the heaven and earth. It was as if he had turned himself into a stone. If he closed his eyes, he would not be able to feel his existence. However, the small pond on the mountainside, which had been quiet for a long time, suddenly moved. There was a very slight sound of splashing at the edge of the pond. The splashing sound was like the sound of a wooden dipper filling water, or the sound of the wind blowing leaves. It was also like the sound of a hand slowly closing the pages of a book. I heard that you were enlightened at the age of 13, no doubts at 30, see through in 3 months, and knowing destiny in 1 day. I heard that you climbed the mountain every day for 17 years without any hindrance. I heard that you saw 4 words outside the wooden door when you climbed the back of the mountain of the academy for the first time. The 4 words were, "The benevolent likes water." So you like to be close to clear streams and quiet ponds all your life. It seems that it is true today. Yisu listened to the soft splashing sound coming from the small pond in the distant mountainside and thought about these words silently in his heart. Then, he let out an extremely lonely and satisfied sigh and took a step towards the edge of the snow-capped peak with a smile. As he took this step, the thin wooden sword behind him floated in the air and made a buzzing sound. The sun in the sky suddenly seemed to become a little brighter. Tens of thousands of beams of light shone on the wooden sword, making the thin sword body shine with golden light. An extremely pure sword style, like a condensed beam of light, came from the top of the snow-capped peak. It was calm and powerful, ignoring any space and distance, and instantly descended to the small pond thousands of feet away. Such a magical Taoism meant that he stood at the highest point in the world, at the top of the knowing destiny state. Although he had not broken the realm, he was only a step away from the Tianqi state. How many times in the world could one see such a powerful Taoism sword? When the pure sword style descended to the sky above the small pond on the mountainside, the thin ice on the surface of the water instantly became more solid. Even the tiny opening was frozen at a speed visible to the naked eye. The splashing sound had long disappeared. Somewhere on the bank of the pond, there was a slight sound of surprise. However, the reaction of the person who made the sound was a little slow. The speed at which he opened his mouth was very slow, so the sound seemed to be deliberately dragged out. It was long and distant, like the call of the protagonist of an opera when he appeared on stage. The middle-aged man at the foot of the mountain frowned slightly. Of course, he had sensed the sword intent. He did not know where the sword intent was heading, but he could vaguely guess who it was that was worthy of the man using his lifetime's cultivation to stab at. He had scattered countless spies in this wilderness, and even mobilized the helpers in the military ministry. That person had appeared in the Blue Lake outside the city of Wei a few days ago. Why did he suddenly come here? But he did not hesitate. As a top powerhouse in the world, he could faintly feel his fate and knew that this was a great opportunity for him. Besides, he had his own pride, so he ignored the encounter on the snow-capped peak, which no one knew, but was destined to shock the world. He solemnly walked towards the exit of the valley. The valley was still filled with a thin mist, covering the smooth and steep stone walls as if they were cut by knives and axes. It also covered the sound of approaching footsteps, but it could not cover the figures of the young people inside forever. In the snow-capped peak, Yisu, the successor of the Jisho Abbey, finally met the scholar on the other side of the line. At the foot of the snow-capped peak, the middle-aged man thought that he would soon meet the Tome of Arcane. Compared with this, it was worthwhile to wait for a long time. Whether it was 14 years, or a lifetime, double the last day. Please vote monthly. I will probably shout many times today. Sorry. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me and vote monthly. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 308. The four young people with complicated identities walked on the steep and smooth stone walls. Their injuries gradually recovered after a few days, but they had run out of food and became weak again because of hunger. Ning Ke did not expect that the passage dug by the previous powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine would be so long. It seemed that they had almost crossed the entire Tianqi Mountains, but they still could not find the exit. He could not help but feel anxious. He was the most afraid of hunger. Thinking that the three women had eaten most of the food he had hidden, he felt even angrier. He stared at Tang Xiaotang and said, "We will all starve to death if we don't get out soon. How many more days will it take?" Tang Xiaotang lowered her head and looked at the beast's tail on her neck. She said in a low voice with some uncertainty, "It should be soon." Ning Ke gasped and looked at her incredulously. He said, "The three of us have been following you for so many days. Don't tell me that you didn't go through when we run out of food." Tang Xiaotang looked up at him and said pitifully, "The front gate was sealed decades ago. Of course I didn't go through it." "That makes some sense. If you think about it carefully, when my youngest martial uncle was killing you with this sword, you were still in your mother's womb. You were not even born. How could you possibly know these things?" Ning Ke's tone was obviously unfriendly. He changed the topic and roared, "Why didn't you tell me at the beginning?" The reason why he dared to treat Tang Xiaotang so fiercely was because he was starving. Under the dual effects of anxiety and hunger, he did not have the time to think that this girl from the Devil Doctrine was the strongest among the four of them. Moreover, when they walked in the mountains these days, this girl from the Devil's Doctrine did not have any fierce aura of the Devil's Doctrine. Instead, she was innocent, cute, and even honest. He gradually forgot her identity. As expected, Tang Xiaotang did not get angry. Instead, she lowered her head in shame and walked to the front. "If we are in the knowing destiny state, how can this passage stop us?" Yi Hongyu's face was a little pale. She looked at the smooth and steep stone wall beside her and said indifferently, "In the end it is a matter of strength." Ning Ke sneered and said, "You don't have to make fun of my low state and poor strength. You were beaten back after taking a few glances at the knowing destiny state. If you were still in the knowing destiny state, would you be so hungry?" Yi Hongyu was silent. Her beautiful face seemed to be covered by a layer of frost. Mo Shanshan said weakly, "We've run out of food. How can you still have the strength to bicker?" Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "I will not quarrel with him after I leave the mountain. I will kill him directly." Ning Ke ignored the Tao addict's threat. Since he escaped from Chang'an City when he was a child, he had experienced many life and death situations. How could he be afraid of this kind of threat? He was not even afraid of death. However, he did have an innate fear of hunger because of his childhood experience. After a moment of silence, he once again found Tang Xiaotang, who was ashamed and speechless, because of this fear and the anger brought by this fear. He mocked, "Probably only people from your Devil's Doctrine would be stupid enough to split the mountain to make a path, thus turning the escape route of people into a dead end." Tang Xiaotang raised her head and looked at him with a solemn expression. She said solemnly, "Both the Holy Land and this passage represent the will of our Enlightenment doctrine to change the world. Please show some respect." Ning Ke did not want to respond to her, especially after he had heard too many stories from Master Lotus about changing the world and creating a new world. However, he could not fully understand the obsession of the Devil's Doctrine. Tang Xiaotang frowned and said, "Can you not be like this? If you think that our Enlightenment doctrine is useless and a bunch of stupid people, then why did you come to our Holy Land?" Ning Ke replied angrily, "If not for the appearance of the Ming hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane, I would not have come even if the headmaster begged me." Tang Xiaotang's eyes lit up when she heard the words, "Ming hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane." She thought about how she and her brother had found nothing in the Holy Land. Her gaze naturally fell on the iron box tied with a cloth belt in front of Ninquebec. She asked, "Have you found it?" Ninke said, "Don't look at me like that. The ashes of an old ghost are in this box. Speaking of which, why do I have to carry it with me? Shouldn't I just find a random place to throw it away?" It was strange that after walking through the passage for a few days, the four of them talked about their childhood, cultivation, and their favorite snack. However, Ning Ke, Mo Shanshan, and Yi Hongyu did not mention to Tang Xiaotang about their encounter at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, nor did they mention the old monk named Lotus 32. This had nothing to do with Tang Xiaotang's identity as a member of the Devil's Doctrine. It had nothing to do with the conflict between the Orthodox and the Devil. It was not even because the experience was so painful and disgusting that the three of them did not want to recall it. On the contrary, it was because the three of them treated their encounter with Master Lotus as the most precious experience in their cultivation lives and were unwilling to share it with others. Ning Ke suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Xiaotang. He asked, "You did not find the tomes of arcane either? That is your territory. You should be familiar with the way back to your hometown. Did you not find anything?" Tang Xiaotang shook her head dejectedly and said, "There is nothing in the Holy Land." Ning Ke thought to himself that there was a pile of white bones and ghosts, and an old guy who was scarier than ghosts. All the major cultivation sects in the world had gathered in the wilderness. The West Hill Divine Palace had put in a lot of effort to find the legendary Ming hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane when the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine opened. However, they had found nothing. The whereabouts of the legendary Tomes of Arcane had naturally become the biggest mystery in everyone's hearts. Yi Hongyu said, "The great divine priest of revelation said that the Ming hand scroll would appear here, so it will definitely appear." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "It seems that the great divine priest of revelation was wrong." Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and said without hesitation, "How could the great divine priest of Divine Hall make a mistake?" Ning Ke looked at her and said mockingly, "If the divine priest of light did not make a mistake 1,000 years ago, how could the Devil's Doctrine appear in this world? Or is it that the West Hill has always thought that the Devil's Doctrine is the right product?" Yi Hongyu pursed her lips tightly and did not speak to him. Mo Shanshan sighed weakly and said with a smile, "Are you not going to argue with him any more?" Yi Hongyu nodded and said, "I did make a mistake earlier." Ning Ke felt slightly proud and thought that no one in this world could beat him in verbal skills except Sang Sang. Yi Hongyu said immediately, "Since I said that I would kill him after we get out, why should I be angry with him?" Ning Ke said bitterly, "It was just a few jokes. Don't take it seriously." Tang Xiaotang, who was walking at the front, suddenly said in surprise, "It's true. It's true." Ning Ke was startled and asked, "What is true?" Tang Xiaotang turned around and pointed at the thin mist in front of the passage. Her clear eyes were full of joy and she said, "That is really the exit. We are out." Looking at the faint light in the mist at the end of the passage, they vaguely guessed that it was the exit. After going through so many hardships and running out of food, they should be jumping for joy. They should even be holding hands, shoulder to shoulder, wearing ribbons and youthful smiles on their faces. However, they stopped and fell into silence. Even Tang Xiaotang was no exception. In the long passage, they were isolated from the rest of the world. That was why they could forget about each other's sect background and temporarily forget about the so-called good and evil, as well as the complicated hatred that could not be washed away by blood. However, once they walked out of this mountain abandoned by Haotian and returned to the real world, all these factors would return. The four of them looked at each other and remained silent for a long time. Yi Hongyu suddenly said indifferently, "I am not used to pretending to be sad. After we get out, I will need to recuperate for a period of time. So it should be a long time before I kill you and the siren from the Devil's Doctrine." Tang Xiaotang looked at her proudly and said, "You are still injured now. I will hit you when you recover." Emo Shanshan gently tidied her cotton dress and said with a smile, "Anyway, it has nothing to do with me." Yi Hongyu sneered and said, "If I want to kill Ning Ke, will it really have nothing to do with you?" Ning Ke waved his hand to stop the meaningless conversation and said, "Let's talk outside. Xiaoteng, you go first." Tang Xiaoteng looked into his eyes and said seriously, "I know what you mean. You are worried that there is something strange outside the fog, so you let me go first. I am a disciple of the Enlightenment doctrine. How can I escape if the people outside are all from the Central Plains? Besides, you are a man. Just like what she said, you are a disgrace to the academy." Ning Ke's expression did not change. He said seriously, "Why did you suddenly become so smart?" Tang Xiaoteng said, "I am just kind-hearted. I am not really stupid." Hearing this, Ning Ke naturally thought of Sang Sang. Sang Sang was just a little stupid, but not really stupid. He suddenly had a strong desire to return to Chang'an. He looked at the exit in the fog and said, "I will go first. The most powerful young disciples of Taoism, Devil and Talisman, are all here. Together with me, the world wayfarer of the Academy, I don't believe that anyone would not kneel down and kowtow when they see our super combination, let alone ambush us." These words were obviously used to boost his courage, just like how he had been bickering and joking with the Tao addict and the girls from the Devil's Doctrine these days. The reason why he did this was to ease the heavy feeling in his chest. No one knew that he, the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy, had joined the Devil. Even Yi Hongyu only vaguely guessed that he had inherited the mantle of youngest uncle and was about to return to the human world. He did not know what the cold and real world outside the valley would do to welcome him if the truth of his joining the Devil was discovered. After a moment of silence, Ning Ke walked into the fog. He reached his right hand behind him and slowly held the handle of the big black umbrella. The big black umbrella was his biggest support in this world. It was the warmest and quietest existence in the world, like a wild cat's dark house. When he faced Lotus at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, he did not have time to take it out and almost died. At this time, he was about to return to the human world from the isolated mountain. The strange feeling and vigilance made him ready to take out the big black umbrella at any time. The world outside the fog was not under the attack of thousands of people. There was no sneak attack. Ning Ke was greeted with a fist bigger than the cheap Tu-Hai bowl that Sang Sang bought. The fist was open and above-board, full of the aura of gold and stone. It broke the wind and arrived without any sense of evil. It was not a sneak attack. It was a kill. There is one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 309. It was indeed not a sneak attack. Even Ning Ke had to admit that it was not a sneak attack after analyzing it, because the fist appeared very openly, and it was at least 100 feet away from his face. No one could sneak attack from a distance of more than 100 feet. Arrows could, but not fist. The reason why the fist could be seen was that the moment it appeared, all the fog in the mountain path was forcibly dispersed by the fist wind into smaller particles, and could no longer obstruct vision. The smooth and steep stone wall was clear. The mountain path was clear. That was why Ning Ke could see the fist. And the middle-aged man who was as strong as a mountain. He had no time to think, let alone see the appearance of the middle-aged man clearly, because the fist bigger than a bowl, after shattering the fog in the passage, almost came to him without a pause. In his sight, the fist instantly became countless times bigger. Because the fist was so fast, the wind in the narrow passage did not have time to swell, but was compressed and stuck to the smooth stone wall. Then all the sound disappeared, and there was a deathly silence. It was not a sneak attack, but it was more terrible than a sneak attack, because it was an absolute kill relying on super strength. In the face of such a fist that could expel the air and seemed to move faster than sound, Ning Ke only had time to make one move. It was a move that he had done countless times before his death, since he was a child. He was extremely familiar with it. The strange cry caused by the strong threat of death was still brewing in his chest and abdomen, and the skin that was stimulated by the shadow of death did not have time to stand up. The big black umbrella had already opened, like a piece of the night sky, blocking in front of him. The fist fell on the surface of the big black umbrella. The big black umbrella did not break, and there was nothing in the world that could break it for the time being. But the thick and greasy surface of the umbrella sank deeply at that moment, and there was a very exaggerated deformation. This was the most serious deformation of the big black umbrella since it appeared in the world, so it could be imagined what kind of power the fist carried. In the second moment that could not be seen by the naked eye, and even time lost its effect, the thick surface of the big black umbrella began to recover, and with the recovery, the incredible and terrible power passed to the umbrella. The umbrella handle left Ning Kei's perlicue, leaving several deep white lacerations. The blood was still in the lacerations and had no time to ooze out, because the third instant was also the instant that transcended time. Ning Kei's eyes reflected the color of the big black umbrella, and then suddenly brightened for a moment. He began to suck in his abdomen, exhale, and flatten his chest. His feet began to stand on tiptoe, ready to leave the ground. Before these subtle movements could be completed, the handle of the big black umbrella had already stabbed into his chest. Fortunately, he had already made these preparations in such a short period of time, so he did not die. The handle of the big black umbrella fell like a mountain, directly hitting his chest. Ning Kei's feet left the ground, his chest and abdomen sunk, and then he flew up. That terrifying mountain-like strength gradually diminished during the long journey. For this, he paid a very heavy price, and blood spurted out like a waterfall. Although the pain in his chest kept tearing his body like a devil, and the fear of death kept stabbing his mind, his eyes were still calm and focused. He kept trying to adjust his posture while flying backward, and at the same time, the primordial chi deep in his lower abdomen quickly spread to his limbs, trying to use the remains left by youngest uncle to repair his injuries. But the fist would not give him time. In fact, the fist did not stop at all. Even the big black umbrella could not block the fist, even for a short moment. Ning Kei was hit and flew. The fist also flew up. It followed him coldly and powerfully like Yama. The passage leading from the Devil's Doctrine to the outside of the Tianqi Mountains was very secretive. In order to ensure that no one could see it from the outside or on the mountain, it was very narrow. Therefore, when the fist broke through the fog and hit Ning Kei, it had to pass by the three girls who had just reacted. Of course, the first one to attack was Mo Shanshan. How could she watch Ning Kei be beaten to death? She felt the horrible power in the fist, and the aura of the middle-aged man was as sharp as metal and stone, and even faintly stronger than that of her master. Under the pressure of many factors, the most excellent female talisman master in the world finally stimulated an unprecedented ability, and drew the most powerful half-divine talisman in the blink of an eye. The distant talisman intent condensed in the passage, and a strong airflow steamed here. However, the fist did not hesitate and directly blasted over. The airflow was completely broken, and the talisman intent was completely destroyed. The second one to attack was the Tao addict Yi Hongyu. In fact, she did not want to attack, because she was the first one to recognize the identity of the middle-aged man. She knew that he was a visiting professor of the Divine Hall, and she knew how powerful he was. Moreover, she did not like Ning Kei at all. If that shameless guy was directly smashed into meat paste by this fist, she would not shed a tear. However, she had to attack because she found that the fist was so perfect. Only an emotionless person could deliver such a perfect punch, and only an irreversible punch could be unstoppable. In an instant, she understood that even if the other party recognized her, there was no way he would allow such a perfect punch to be flawed in the slightest. This punch had been infused with the most absolute determination, and this was the attitude that the person who delivered the punch had towards the world. She stood on the path that the fist had to pass, so she could only display the most powerful invisible Taoist sword, and cut it down. She did not have any hope for this sword, because she knew that even if she was still in the knowing destiny state, she was far from being a match for the middle-aged man. She even thought that even the great divine priest of judgment was not as powerful as the opponent. Sure enough, the most powerful invisible Taoist sword of the Tao addict was like a wooden sword of a child in front of this fist. It suddenly collapsed and shattered, and instantly became invisible, leaving no trace in the passage. The last one to attack was Tang Xiaotang. Because she thought that as a disciple of the Enlightenment doctrine, the exit might be full of the so-called righteous cultivators of the Central Plains, so she insisted on standing at the back. She did not know who the middle-aged man was, but she guessed who he was. So there was no fear in her clear eyes, but a trace of excitement. The excitement was not because she believed that she could defeat the opponent. In fact, she knew that it was impossible for her to defeat the opponent. So she did not fight head-on like she did with the Snowfield direwolves, nor did she slash Prince Long Qing with the blood-red giant knife. Instead, she crossed her arms in front of her body, making the strongest defense she could make. Unsurprisingly, the cross-shaped arms hit back on her delicate chest heavily, and instantly dispersed. The fist style of this fist was always focused on Ningquebet. It only occasionally passed by the three girls, and did not release its real power. However, this kind of passing by was like a flood passing by a small mountain village, destroying everything. Ning Ke closed the big black umbrella with a swoosh, letting it help him regain his balance like a black tail. Looking at the fist that was getting closer and closer, his eyes were calm and focused, and his left hand had already grasped the hilt of the knife behind him. The shadow of death was right in front of him, because the fist was right in front of him. He was very afraid. The experience of struggling for survival in the past years told him that the more dangerous the situation was, the more calm he had to be. Many times, it was this calmness that had successfully kept him away from death. He hoped that it could be the same today. It was as if Haotian or Yama had heard his prayer, moved by his calmness in the face of death. The fragments of information that Master Lotus had imprinted in his spiritual world suddenly came to life. Ning Ke could not understand those things, but he understood the fist. He even thought of many ways to deal with it without reason. Those ways were so wonderful and unimaginable, but those ways required a state that he could not reach now. Was this the absolute difference in the power of the state? Ning Ke looked at the fist, and there was finally a trace of despair in his eyes. From the moment he broke through the fog to the moment he arrived in front of Ning Ke, the middle-aged man who was as burly as a mountain had only punched once. After pondering for many days by the Hulun Sea, he threw away all the shackles of the world and decided to make a complete break with the past. This was a punch that gathered all the spirit of a powerhouse at the peak of martial arts in the world. Just one of these punches was enough to beat the four young experts like dogs. Such a punch could not be stopped at all. There were not many people in the world who were worthy of his punch twice. And no one could make this punch stop. The Tang Emperor could not, and neither could the West Hill Divine Palace Hierarch. However, when the fist was about to touch Ning Ke, it stopped. Such a decisive and perfect punch, which Yi Hongyu thought was a one-way trip, stopped in front of Ning Ke just like that. This change between extreme movement and extreme stillness showed the middle-aged man's incredible state of martial art. Yes, no one in the world could make this punch stop, except for the middle-aged man himself. However, this punch came from Tuyang City thousands of miles away, across the plains and the lake, with endless determination, and even with the determination to be the enemy of the world. Why did it stop at this moment? A scholar had appeared beside Ning Ke out of nowhere. This scholar had straight eyebrows and wide eyes, and looked amiable. He wore an old robe and a pair of broken straw shoes. A wooden dipper was tied to his waist, and an old book was stuck in it. He was covered with dust, but he looked extremely clean. It was hard to tell how old the scholar was, and he did not reveal any powerful aura. He just stood quietly beside Ning Ke, and even seemed a little honest and dull. However, as long as he stood there, no matter how strong the punch was, no matter how decisive it was, the punch that could not be stopped had to stop, and did not dare to move forward at all. Because he was the eldest brother of the Academy. Yes, dear, there is still one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 310. Although the back of the mountain of the Academy was the only unknown place that was connected to the secular world, it had the reputation of being an unknown place after all. Naturally, it was a bit mysterious to outsiders. Especially after Yuan Shihao, the disciples of the back of the mountain of the Academy rarely appeared in the world. Therefore, not many people really knew about that place and who lived there. Not to mention the secular empires, the West Hill Divine Palace, even the Jishou Abbey, the Xiankong Temple, and the Devil's Doctrine only knew the general situation of the back of the mountain of the Academy. They only knew that there were 13 core disciples of the headmaster of the Academy behind the clouds and mist. They cultivated their day and night, and their strength was unfathomable. Among all the core disciples of the headmaster of the Academy, the most famous ones were second brother Jun Mo and Chen Pippi. The so-called fame here was, of course, in the top circle of the cultivation world. Second brother was famous for his pride and confidence, while Chen Pippi was famous because he was recognized by Haotian Taoism as a real cultivation genius not long after he was born and was recognized by the Jishou Abbey. The only thing the cultivation world knew about the eldest brother of the Academy was that he was a scholar. He often held a scroll in his hand and tied a water ladle around his waist. He traveled with the headmaster of the Academy all year round. Few people could see him with their own eyes, and no one had ever really fought with him. However, no one dared to look down on the eldest brother of the Academy. Because the eldest brother of the Academy was the only one who was qualified to travel around the world with the headmaster of the Academy. Jun Mo, who was perversely proud, would sigh every time he mentioned his senior brother, and then express his supreme respect with the most unquestionable expression. There were many strong, proud and confident people in this world, such as the middle-aged man. However, none of them dared to say that they were stronger, prouder, and more confident than the monster Jun Mo. Therefore, as long as they were not really crazy, they would not try to challenge the eldest brother of the Academy. Therefore, when the ordinary scholar appeared beside Ning Ke, the fist with decades of fierce and chilling aura, which could not be stopped even by 100,000 mountains, had to stop. The middle-aged man had never seen him before, but he saw the water ladle and the scroll at the waist of the scholar. Therefore, he knew that he was the eldest brother of the Academy without any reason. Because the eldest brother of the Academy was the eldest brother of the Academy. Whether he was holding a scroll, walking in the ruts of the wilderness, or half-squatting by the stream to fetch water with a ladle, as long as you saw him, you would know that he was the legendary eldest brother of the Academy. Because there was only one Academy in the world, and the Academy only had one eldest brother. He was different from the middle-aged man who had been struggling in the mortal world for many years. Even though he had meditated for many days by the Hulun Sea and tried to cut off the past from the past, he was still distracted by too many worldly thoughts and stopped his fist. He was different from the middle-aged man who had struggled in the mortal world for many years. Standing on the top of the snow-capped peak, Yi Su had always wanted to challenge the eldest brother of the Academy. He was the successor of the Jishou Abbey and the most powerful world wayfarer in Haotian Taoism. 14 years ago, he had been arrogant and conceited since he was a teenager. He could understand the arrogance of Mr. Ku and the second brother of the Academy, Jun Mo. Therefore, he respected the scholar whom he had never met because of Jun Mo's attitude. but he would never miss the opportunity to challenge the scholar. Because his arrogance and confidence in his youth had gradually disappeared and turned into silence and loneliness because of the scholar's calmness and joy on the other side of the black line. He knew very well that he, who walked the world in silence and loneliness with a wooden sword on his back, was far stronger than the arrogant and conceited him. However, he always wanted to find what he had lost, so he had to meet the person on the other side of the black line. This idea could even be called an emotion of desire. In these years, as his cultivation state became more and more profound, and as his understanding of the world became clearer, the desire became stronger and stronger in his heart. It was even stronger than the sunlight above the snow-capped peak. After 14 years, he finally met the scholar and had a chance to challenge him. For the tomes of the arcane, the middle-aged man walked on the lake ice and tried to kill him. If the scholar did not want to see the guy named Ning Ke die like this, then he had to fight. Yi Su was not sure whether he could force the scholar to fight if the scholar did not move. But since the scholar showed his trace and was ready to fight, then he was confident that he could make this encounter a reality. Because he could make the first move. The thin wooden sword floated in the air above the snow-capped peak. The sun was so bright. The wooden sword had turned into a golden sword. The strong and pure aura of the Taoist sword had completely suppressed the small pool on the mountainside. The snow on the top of the snow-capped peak was all crushed by the sword aura into ice that was harder than iron. The ice reflected the sunlight into colorful colors, as if it had become a floor of agate jewelry. This was the most powerful Taoist sword that Yi Su had ever displayed in his life. It contained the supreme attainments of Haotian Taoism. He had cultivated hard in the Jishou Abbey for more than 10 years and traveled around the world for more than 10 years. He had realized the ultimate life-death sword style before he entered the Hermetic training. When the sword of Tao disregarded the vast distance and descended to the side of the pool, Yi Su sighed in the depths of his heart. Even he himself was moved by this strike. He felt that it was perfect and pure to the extreme, without a speck of dust on it. At that time, the scholar by the pool raised his head and looked at the top of the snow-capped peak in surprise. His shabby cotton-padded jacket was covered with dust, leaving traces of thousands of miles of travel. But it gave people the feeling that it was extremely clean. No one knew how long had passed. Maybe it was a long time, or maybe it was just a blink of the scholar's eyes. The ice on the top of the snow-capped peak gradually melted and converged into a very thin stream. Yi Su, who was standing by the snow cliff, slowly lowered his head to look at the water beside his feet. No one could tell what expression he had on his face. The pure and powerful life-death sword style, condensed with thousands of beams of sunlight, instantly crushed the snow into ice. But the ice melted at this time, which could only mean that the sword style that should have been condensed like a beam of light was actually slowly leaking. Unbeknownst to him, the thin wooden sword had returned to his hands. The scholar by the pool on the mountainside had disappeared without a trace. Yi Su showed a very sarcastic smile on his face, and a very dim blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The sarcastic smile was naturally to mock himself. He had known the other party for many years and had silently longed to meet him for many years. However, when they really met, the most powerful Taoist sword that he could display could not suppress the other party at all. It could not even make the other party stay for a longer time. The extremely powerful successor of the Jishou Abbey, who had seen through the Hermetic training, could not make the scholar stay. The scholar appeared in the valley beside Ning Ke, and calmly asked the powerhouse at the peak of martial arts to stop punching. There was an academy in the south of Chang'an, and there was an eldest brother in the back of the mountain of the academy. In the words of the proud and conceited second brother, the reason why the eldest brother was naturally because he ranked first in the academy. Whether it was the state of cultivation, playing chess, playing the zither, painting, embroidery, or cooking, he ranked first. Today's update ends. Please vote for me. I will also rank first like the eldest brother. to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 3:11. It was not until the fist stopped that the wind in the tunnel suddenly roared. The natural energy was in a mess, and all the fog was blown away. The smooth and steep stone wall began to peel like a pastry that had been kept for a long time. The stone wall that had become brittle rustled and fell like a rain of paper-thin stone chips. The fist was extremely stable, and did not tremble in the slightest. The hard knuckles were pale white, looking like a strong bamboo in the wind, or like the round handle of a steel knife. To be able to suddenly stop when the indomitable momentum had reached its peak, and to be able to be so stable, it proved that the middle-aged man who punched this fist was very powerful. But the more powerful the middle-aged man and his fist were, the more powerful the eldest brother of the academy was. The eldest brother looked at the fist calmly, and did not say a word. The middle-aged man slowly bent his elbow and retracted his fist. The eldest brother's gentle eyes fell on the middle-aged man's face. The middle-aged man slightly lowered his head and silently took a step back. The eldest brother's eyes fell on the stone chips under the middle-aged man's feet. The middle-aged man slightly frowned and silently took another step back. The eldest brother calmly looked at his shoulder. The middle-aged man retreated again. The eldest brother continued to look at him. The middle-aged man retreated again and again, until he was about to exit the passageway. At this moment, he suddenly stopped and slightly raised his thick silkworm-like eyebrows. He calmly looked back at the eldest brother's gentle eyes and opened his blood-red lips slightly. He said in a voice that was like metal and stone, "I'm sorry." As the two words burst out from his lips, the half-stretched fist in front of him slowly loosened. The 5 fingers slowly released like old bamboo blooming, and then suddenly shrank. An extremely powerful and overbearing aura was released from the middle-aged man, making his clothes flutter in the wind. An invisible force was released between the 5 fingers that were spread out and then closed again, aiming at Ning Kei's chest and abdomen through the air. After all, he was a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts. Although he was afraid of the eldest brother of the academy, it did not mean that he would become a coward in front of him and would not dare to attack at all. When the eldest brother appeared, he had been showing weakness and retreated again and again. But when he was about to exit the passageway and saw that he could not threaten Ning Kei at all, when everyone had begun to relax, he made his move. With a tearing sound, the cloth in front of Ning Kei's chest broke. The iron box tied to the cloth belt suddenly flew out and landed in the hands of the middle-aged man. By transforming the killing intent of his fist into the intent of binding his fingers, he displayed the deepest understanding of martial arts. His grasp of timing and his strong decisiveness allowed him to apply the art of war to the confrontation of force. He could be said to be like a god in the art of war. There were very few people in the world who could cultivate martial arts and the art of war to the pinnacle. Even in the great Tang Empire, only the 4 great generals could do it. With the iron box in hand, the middle-aged man had nothing else to ask for. He looked at eldest brother silently and continued to slowly retreat out of the valley. His speed did not seem to increase, but he had retreated more than 10 feet in an instant. Looking at the figure of the middle-aged man retreating out of the valley, eldest brother was slightly taken aback. He was indeed surprised that the middle-aged man had clearly intended to retreat, but in the end, he still forced himself to attack. He sighed and said, "Why bother?" Eldest brother did not speak too slowly, but his tone was a little light. It seemed that there was a very strange pause before every word, so it seemed that he had said the word, "Why bother," for a long time. Even he did not expect the middle-aged man's action, so he did not have time to respond. Of course, Ning Kei did not have any reaction. He did not come to his senses until the middle-aged man retreated far away with the iron box. Moreover, he had suffered too much shock at this time and had no spare time to think about other problems. According to the description of appearance that he had memorized for so many years, that powerful middle-aged man with eyebrows like black silkworms and lips like thick blood should be Xiaoho? The Xiaoho who killed the whole family of the general's mansion and turned his happy life into cultivation in the underworld? The Xiaoho who massacred several villages at the border and killed Darky's whole family? And who was this scholar who wore a tattered coat and straw sandals beside him? Ning Ke had seen him on the first day he entered the academy. He clearly remembered this clean, amiable and trustworthy scholar who made him fearful. He remembered that the scholar wanted to exchange the water ladle at his waist for his big black umbrella. At this time, he had already guessed that this scholar was probably his eldest brother. After eldest brother sighed, he looked at Ning Ke and asked, "Is the box important? Do you want to snatch it back?" Ning Ke did not understand why the middle-aged man, who might be Xiaoho, wanted to snatch the iron box. He also did not understand why the scholar, who might be his eldest brother, could still ask such a slow question at this time. The box contained the ashes of Master Lotus, which was not worth a single cent. Of course, there was no need to take the risk to snatch it back. However, the other party had already snatched it for such a long time. Wasn't it a little too slow to ask him now? Suddenly, he remembered that Chun Pippi had once told him that eldest brother was very serious when he did things. That was why he moved very slowly, very slowly. Today, he had seen that eldest brother was indeed a very slow person. Ning Ke bowed respectfully and said with his head lowered, "The box is not important. There is no need to snatch it." Then, he raised his head and looked at it seriously. It was a scholar who wore a cotton-padded coat and tattered shoes. An old book was stuck at his waist and a water ladle was tied to it. He did not give off any strong aura, nor was he tall or mighty. However, standing beside this scholar, Ning Ke felt inexplicably safe. He felt calm and happy, as if he had returned home and knew that no one would dare to bully him. It was like standing under a lush green tree, unafraid of the outside world's wind and rain. This absolute and unquestionable sense of security even moved him to silence. Eldest brother could roughly understand his feelings at this time and smiled warmly. When he began to seriously think about how he should start a conversation with his youngest brother, he suddenly felt something and looked up at the sky in surprise. The fog in the mountain road had long been shattered by the fist, and the fog was still lingering in the air. Looking up at the sky, he could not see the snow-capped peak at all. He could only see that the fog had been torn open, and there was a figure in front of the crack. The figure should have jumped down from the snow-capped peak, or more like it had jumped down from the sky. It continuously broke through the air and fog, making a heart-palpitating low vibrating sound. It could be imagined how fast it had reached. The thin fog on the mountain road dispersed with a bang, and a circular hole appeared. The figure fell from it, wrapped in a semicircle of water mist, and the bloody flame on its legs was burning vigorously. A strong and overbearing aura shrouded the ground from the figure, locking the area of dozens of feet. The pair of old boots, which had walked all the way from the cold region of the far north, was getting closer and closer to the ground, and was about to step on the middle-aged man's head. When the middle-aged man came, he was like fire, and when he retreated, he was also extremely fast. However, the person who jumped down from the sky had obviously been lying in wait for a long time. He had actually locked the ground of dozens of feet in a domineering manner, knowing that no matter where the middle-aged man retreated, he would not be able to completely avoid it. More importantly, he hoped that the middle-aged man would avoid it. Under such circumstances, as long as the middle-aged man avoided it again today, the breath that the other party relied on to survive in this world would be exhausted, and the result would be death. However, what could he do if he did not avoid it? The last time the man jumped down from the sky, it was the first time his old boots had stepped on the wilderness. With one step, he had crushed the shield of the strongest warrior of the royal court tribe, and trampled the sorcerer into a puddle of blood. The middle-aged man did not avoid it, because he knew he could not avoid it, because he could clearly feel the murderous intent of the foot above his head, and the familiar and even somewhat intimate sense of ruthlessness. Although he had not smelled it for many years, no matter how long it had been, as long as he smelled it, he would be vigilant and silent. Because it was also his smell, the smell that belonged to the Enlightenment sect. The middle-aged man's eyebrows that were dense like black silkworms suddenly rose up, and a trace of ruthlessness appeared on his handsome face. His feet sank into the hard stone ground with a bang, and he bent his knees and transferred all the cultivation in his body into his right fist. He smashed his fist towards the sky. The old boots with blood-red flames, and the fist with a metallic luster, met in the valley. The powerful and domineering aura directly tore the primordial chi of the universe in the valley into countless tiny turbulence. The turbulence could not escape in all directions, but was pitifully wrapped in by these two completely opposite and even conflicting yet equally domineering and powerful auras, forming two semicircular air shields. The semicircular air shield around the old boots flashed with a blood-red light, and spat towards the sky with a hissing sound. The semicircular air shield around the fist flashed with a golden luster, and spat towards the ground with a hissing sound. Except for the hissing sound of the air splashing, the valley was dead silent. The Holland Sea in the distance outside the valley suddenly trembled. Dozens of tiny cracks appeared on the increasingly solid ice surface, which was blown by the cold wind. At the intersection of the cracks, ice avalanches and water appeared. A few fish that were not so fat jumped out of the ice holes, and were frozen after struggling for a while on the ice. Then a sound came from the valley. The sound was extremely loud, and contained pure power, like a clap of thunder. A big pit half the depth of a person appeared on the ground. After the clap of thunder came a distant echo, like the sound of a bell. The stone chips that had just been shattered by the two auras no longer flew in the air, but calmly fell down. Emo Shanshan and the others, who were shocked by the two auras again, found that they were not seriously injured. The two most domineering auras in the world collided, but there was almost no leakage of power. Instead, they accurately locked each other, and then the distant heaven and earth gave enough response. When the two domineering auras collided, they actually evolved into a grand feeling. What state had the two people who were fighting reached? Eldest brother looked at the collision of the two absolute powers in front of him, and even he was full of praise. He said seriously to Ning Ke, who was standing behind him, "The previous masters of the Devil's Doctrine were basically all killed by youngest uncle. Now it is very difficult to see two great masters of the Devil's Doctrine face to face. Youngest brother, you have to carefully observe and learn." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 312. Hearing this, Ning Ke found a shocking truth. The man who jumped down from the sky was probably Tang, the world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine mentioned by Chen Pipi. But Xia Ho was a general of the Tang Empire and a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. Why did eldest brother say that he was also a powerhouse of the Devil's Doctrine? Eldest brother's expression and tone were very calm, or in other words, very slow. Ning Ke was very shocked and spent a lot of time thinking. So when he helped Emo Shanshan up and walked to the misty exit of the valley with the other two girls, the earth-shaking battle had been going on for a long time. A hole about half a person's depth had appeared on the hard stone ground, and there were two clear footprints at the bottom of the hole. With the footprints as the center, countless fine cracks spread out in all directions, and finally extended for about 100 feet, looking like a huge spider web. Ning Ke looked at the spider web-like cracks on the ground and imagined the terrible power produced when the man's foot from the sky met with Xia Ho's fist from the sky. He could not help but be shocked. Now that he had entered the see-through state in cultivation and had comprehended the Howran sword left by youngest uncle, he could already be classified as a powerhouse. but he knew clearly that in the face of such absolute power, he could not resist at all and would be shaken into a bloody pulp. Two figures moved at a high speed between the spider web-like cracks. Because they were too fast to be seen by the naked eye, one could only judge their specific location by the sound of the wind breaking through the air. The sound of the wind breaking through the air was so sharp that it even hurt the eardrums of the onlookers. Because they were entangled with each other, especially the man who fell from the sky, silently and fiercely concentrated his killing intent on Xia Ho, the two figures could not separate at all. The area of more than 100 feet seemed quite spacious, but under their terrifying high speed, it was actually no different from the size of a needle tip. The two powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine, who were of a generation apart, had tempered their bodies to the extreme and had perfect control of their own bodies, but still could not completely avoid each other's attack. Since they could not avoid each other, then they should first attack each other to death. This was the fighting philosophy of the Devil's Doctrine. In a short period of time that was too short to blink, the two figures in the field collided no less than 10 times in silence. Powerful auras surged into the surroundings like a dense tide, and the thunderous sounds continuously became an ancient temple bell that seemed to never stop ringing. Tang's fists danced in the air, bringing out streaks of blood-colored flames, causing the air to tremble and burn. He hit Xia Ho's body heavily, bursting out a mark about 2 fingers deep. There was a hint of fire flowing in the mark, and there was a burning smell. In comparison, Xia Ho's fists were more silent and solid. His tough knuckles glowed with a very faint metallic luster. Every punch was like a blunt broadsword slashing forward, hitting Dun's body as if he was forging iron. Every punch hit Xia Ho's body, and the sound of thunder was continuous. Dozens of dense deep pits appeared on the stone walls of the mountain. The smoke and dust gradually disappeared, and the smooth inner walls of the deep pits were revealed, which looked extremely terrifying, as expected of people with the strongest physical strength in the world. These two men's fists did not actually touch the stone wall. Just the killing intent that leaked out was enough to pierce through the hard stone wall like it was dough. However, when such powerful fists truly smashed into each other's bodies, they did not seem to feel anything at all. What kind of fists were these? What kind of physical bodies? Every punch that fell on their bodies was like a heavy hammer falling on an ancient bell. The sound became more and more intense and shrill, and the situation became more and more dangerous. There was a strong wind at the side of the valley, and the gravel danced wildly. Ning Ke and the other 3 stood behind eldest brother and did not rush directly. However, they could feel the terrifying power coming from there, and their faces could not help but become a little pale. This was because their eardrums were oppressed by the wind and sound of the fists, and more so because their minds were suppressed by the power of the two men. Yi Hongyu stared at the man who fell from the sky, and her pale cheeks revealed her true feelings. She gradually admitted that this unusually ordinary man in a leather coat was indeed qualified to be on the same level as her brother. Tang Xiaotang and her eyes fell on the same place, looking at her brother. Her pale cheeks were full of worry, and her clear and bright eyes constantly showed an expression of cheering for him. Emo Shanshan stood beside Ning Quebec. Her small round face was slightly pale, and her eyes seemed a little dim. She was originally a calligraphy addict who was respected and even feared by her fellow cultivators. However, this time she came to the wilderness and met so many grand cultivators. Only then did she know that the real powerful figures were hiding behind the world. She was deeply shocked, especially when she found out that the two men who were fighting at this time were so powerful that even her master, the master of calligrapher, would not be able to take advantage of them. Thinking of this, she could not help but feel a little sad. Ning Ke was not as complicated as the 3 girls thought. He was just following eldest brother's request and watching this rare battle of the physical peak seriously. He did not forget to use his superhuman perception to feel the disturbance of the qi of heaven and earth caused by the two figures. However, as soon as he used his psyche power to feel the surrounding chi of heaven and earth, he knew that he had made a big mistake. At this time, the chi of heaven and earth inside and outside the valley had been torn into countless pieces by the wind of the two men's fists. The turbulence formed by those pieces flowed irregularly and was extremely complicated. With his current state, it was pure wishful thinking for him to feel the changes in it. His sense of perception was instantly violently shaken, and his face turned pale. He should have been injured. The two men were too powerful. According to the probability or the general law given by Haotian, figures with such powerful physical bodies should be unparalleled in the world. However, today there were two of them at the same time. Looking at the sky full of gravel, looking at the more and more invisible stone pits that appeared like a miracle, and looking at the two godlike murderous figures, Ning Ke was stunned. After a while, he came to his senses and asked in a slightly hoarse voice, "Are we just going to watch them fight like this? Or should we leave first? I always feel that it is very dangerous to stay with these monsters. Even a stone that they unconsciously kick away is more terrible than a crossbow arrow." Eldest brother looked at him and said confusedly, "Then what should we do?" Ning Ke looked at the scene and said with a smile, "Or you can poke them to death with one finger? How can it be possible with one finger? I'm not a monster like them. I'm very happy that they didn't attack me for the headmaster and the academy's sake. But I can't do anything if they want to fight among themselves. I can't always stop them. As for taking the initiative to attack them, I feel that it is somewhat inconvenient and unkind." Eldest brother was a very kind person, so he would not attack at this time. He explained patiently, slowly, and gently, "And I'm really not good at fighting." As a member of the back of the mountain of the academy, Ning Ke certainly knew that the senior brothers and sisters living in the mountain were all strange guys. Only he was slightly normal. However, he still did not expect that eldest brother would give such an answer. "No one would dare to attack you if you just stood here, but you still said that the other party was a monster and you were not a monster? If you said that you were not good at fighting, then who in this world dared to say that they were good at fighting?" Finding that eldest brother was also a little unreliable, Ning Ke still felt the stable, warm, and intimate feeling in his heart, but the respect in his heart instantly fell to the ground. He ignored eldest brother and quietly moved to Tang Xiaotong's side, asking, "Your brother?" Tang Xiaotong nodded. Ning Ke thought that it was true. The only person who could fight with Xia Ho, a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts, was the world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine. He then asked, "Why do people in your family like to jump down from the sky?" Tang Xiaotong nervously watched the fight and casually answered, "It's hard to fall down, so I'm too lazy to walk." Ning Ke's body slightly stiffened, thinking that this pair of brother and sister from the Devil's Doctrine were really a pair of wonderful people who were extremely lazy. At this moment, the two roaring figures in the field finally stopped. In the battle, Tang's leather coat had already been fluttered like butterflies under Xia Ho's iron fists, and then fell to the ground like lead weight. His upper body was naked, and his muscles were as hard as rocks. The skin surface of his face and body was condensed with a very thin layer of iron, especially in his eyes, which faintly revealed an ominous feeling of rust. Xiaoho's silkworm-like eyebrows were completely burnt and had lost all vitality. He looked like a lifeless black insect. His eyes were filled with a strong sense of dryness, as if there was an autumn hidden in them. Tang looked at him indifferently and said, "You want to take the tomes of arcane, so I will take your life." Xiaoho slowly tore off the tattered clothes on his body, revealing the armor underneath. He looked at Tang indifferently and said, "There are many people in this world who want to kill me, but at least no one has succeeded so far." Today, the battle between the two generations of powerhouses in the Devil's Doctrine began with Tang's supreme killing intent. He silently followed behind Ning Ke and the others, waiting for Xia Ho to appear and snatch the tomes of arcane. He had been silently waiting for this sneak attack, or rather, to kill, for this opportunity for many years. He had the advantage of time, place, and people, so Xia Ho's injuries were obviously more serious than his. However, Xia Ho did not die after all. Even though Xia Ho's chest and abdomen had suffered numerous heavy punches, and the cotton coat on his body was full of holes like the mold of the Academy's plum cake, and his aura was extremely dry and gloomy, he still stood there like an unshakable mountain. Years ago, the traitor of the Devil's Doctrine had personally cooked and killed the Saintess, surrendered to the West Hill Divine Palace, and became a visiting professor. He had led the army in the Tang Empire for many years, and such a powerful person would not die so easily. After a moment of silence, Tang said, "Your injuries are much more serious than mine. I still have a chance." Xia Ho shook his head and said, "After all, you are not your teacher. So no matter how serious my injuries are, you can't kill me on the spot. You are the evildoer of the Devil's Doctrine, and I am a visiting professor of Haotian Taoism, an imperial general. In this bright world, under the brilliant Haotian, how can you have a chance to kill me?" Tang turned to look at the scholar among the crowd and asked seriously, "Mr. First, what do you want to say?" Eldest brother shook his head and said honestly, "Your affairs have nothing to do with the Academy. I was just ordered by my teacher to come to the wilderness to take youngest brother back to Chang'an." Honest people did not always speak the truth. Coming to the wilderness to pick up Ning Ke was not on the way. Tang nodded in acknowledgement. Eldest brother suddenly pointed to the snow-capped peak and said, "I was just passing by, but I don't know what that person would think." A sword-style attack from the snow-capped peak, instantly crossing the ice and crushing the snow. After a moment, the lonely and no longer proud man with a wooden sword appeared on the snow cliff in the distance. It's really hard to write in the hotel. Tomorrow's chapter may be a little late. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 313. At the foot of Tianqi Mountain, two generations of powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine confronted each other. On the distant snow cliff, the world wayfarer of Haotian Taoism was gliding over with a sword on his back. Compared to these truly great figures, Ning Ke was naturally an insignificant character. Although he was now a world wayfarer of the Academy, the only one who was qualified to speak on behalf of the Academy was the eldest brother, who was standing quietly in the field. Therefore, no one paid attention to him and treated him as a passerby. Ning Ke did not feel sad about being ignored. On the contrary, he was happy that he had been forgotten by the crowd. Only in this way could he focus on the middle-aged man and not worry about being discovered by the crowd. Looking at the middle-aged man's thick brows and the killing intent in his eyes, his expression did not change, but his hands behind his back gradually tightened. He felt that his throat was a little dry and wanted to drink some blood to moisten it. His life was directly changed by this middle-aged man called Xia Ho. His happy family became a pool of blood because of this man. Because of this man, he lived in a dark hell on earth for many years. Revenge was the most primitive and instinctive emotion of human beings, and Ning Ke was no exception. Ever since he knew the name and identity of this man, he had secretly investigated and watched this man for many years. He was very familiar with everything about this man, including his most inconspicuous features and habits, but today was the first time he saw him with his own eyes. The world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine called Tang was so powerful that he had ambushed Xia Ho with a strong murderous intent. However, he had failed to kill Xia Ho on the spot. After witnessing this earth-shattering battle, Ning Ke finally had a clear understanding of Xia Ho's strength. He was more and more aware that he still had a long way to go if he wanted to take revenge. However, he didn't feel any fear or depression in his heart. Instead, he became more confident and calm, firmly believing that he would be able to kill Xia Ho with his own hands one day, because no matter how powerful Xia Ho was, he still didn't make a move against eldest brother. Even if he couldn't reach eldest brother's realm in his lifetime, as long as he was in the academy, he would have unlimited possibilities. Tang looked at Xiaohou expressionlessly and said, "If you were in Tuyang City, I really wouldn't know how to kill you. But since you left Tuyang City, and hid in the north of Hulland Sea with the intention of killing people and robbing the tomes of Arcane, how could I miss this opportunity to kill you? Perhaps you've already forgotten that you weren't the only one who survived the Enlightenment doctrine." Xiaohou said, "There are many people who want to kill me." Tang said, "To clean up the sect, no one has a better reason to kill you than me." Xiaohou said, "But you failed to kill me." Tang said, "The cultivation of the Enlightenment doctrine is about advancing forward courageously across the world. The Desolate Man tribe is never afraid of any strong enemy. You did not dare to throw that punch earlier, which means that you are already old. Old means useless." He looked at Xiaohou and continued to say indifferently, "Even if I can't kill you on the spot today, at least I know something. The most powerful man in the Enlightenment doctrine in the past has now become a cowardly piece of trash, an old useless bastard who only dares to hide in his armor. How many days can a person like him survive under my fist?" After a moment of silence, Xiaohou looked at Tang and said sarcastically, "Have you just finished adjusting your qi circulation?" Dun said, "You're almost there. Yisu still needs some time to get here." "Very well." Xiaohou stretched out his hand and tore off his ragged coat, which was riddled with countless holes, revealing a bright gray armor underneath. The armor was engraved with dense black magic symbols, which were flowing with a solemn and powerful aura. Ning Ke stood beside the eldest brother and noticed that Xiaohou's aura suddenly rose after revealing the armor. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He looked at the talisman characters on the bright armor and roughly guessed that it was the powerful armor designed by Professor Huang He and made by the two senior brothers at the back of the mountain of the academy. Tang silently looked at the armor on Xiaohou's body. Suddenly, he reached into the air beside him and grasped a giant blood-colored knife. The knife was handed to him by Tang Xiaotang. Tang said, "I didn't want to use the knife because a cowardly traitor like you doesn't deserve to die under this knife. But since the armor you wear is from the academy, it would be disrespectful if I didn't use the knife." Xiaohou looked at the giant blood-colored machete and naturally recalled many scenes from many years ago. He said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I didn't expect that the 23-year cicada cultivation could really abandon everything in the world. He even left this knife to you." Tang had already finished regulating his qi circulation and did not say another word to him. The burning red flame between his calves suddenly burst out, and his hill-like body blasted towards Xiaohou at a terrifying speed. The two powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine were very familiar with each other's cultivation methods and fighting skills. Because of this, they could not use any means to lure the enemy or dodge. They could only collide with each other like the first tens of thousands of punches that sounded like a bell. This time the battle was not as terrible as before. The two figures collided and then separated, but it was more dangerous than before. When the wind and sand fell, Tang's left shoulder seemed to have collapsed, and blood flowed. On the other hand, Xiaohou's armor had an additional deep cut. The complicated runes were stagnant and no longer as bright as before. Instead, it had become extremely dim, as if it had been placed in the storeroom for hundreds of years and was about to scatter. Xiaohou slowly narrowed his eyes and touched the cold iron box on his waist with his right hand. Wherever his fingers touched, the rust would fall off. As one of the few powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine left in the world, Tang clearly knew how powerful this traitor was. In the entire front gate, except for his teacher who had disappeared for many years, no one dared to say that they could defeat him. Without the armor, perhaps the Enlightenment Doctrine powerhouse who had once dominated the wilderness would really come back. At this moment, Xiaohou, who was determined to use all his spirit and strength at the moment of life and death, was more dangerous than before. But Tang had waited silently in the cold region of the far north for more than 10 years, and finally had a chance to go south to kill this traitor. Of course, he would not miss this opportunity. So he held the hilt tightly and wanted to make the second cut. However, he did not make the second cut, because a wooden Taoist sword broke through the air and fell on the solid ground between him and Xia Ho. The hiltless tail of the sword trembled slightly and made a light buzzing sound. An extremely lonely and desolate aura spread out from the wooden sword in all directions. It was as if it was not a wooden sword, but an old tree that had lived in the wilderness for many years and could collapse at any moment. Looking at the wooden sword, Tang frowned slightly and found that the proud and lonely guy went down the snow-capped peak faster than he had imagined. He could not help but wonder what had happened to make the person who had already stood at the peak of the 5 states of cultivation climb a little further in such a short period of time. Looking at the wooden sword that was as desolate as an old tree, he knew that he had lost the chance to fight with Xia Ho today because of his slight miscalculation of that person's speed. After a moment of silence, he handed the knife to his sister behind him. Tang Xiaotang put away the knife, and no one in the field could see where she had put it. Xia Ho looked at Tang Xiaotang indifferently and slowly released the aura that was sometimes rusty and sometimes as hot as molten steel. Then he silently retreated more than 100 feet out of the field. He retreated to leave a place for the field. There were very few people in the world who were qualified for Xia Ho to give up his place, but today there were many people at the foot of the mountain north of the Hulun Sea. Yi Su stood beside the wooden sword without anyone noticing when his light plain robe fluttered in the cold wind. After he pulled out the wooden sword from the ground and carried it back, the desolate and lonely aura on the wooden sword seemed to return to him. His body became a desolate old tree. This was the first time that Ning Ke saw Yi Su, the successor of Jishou Abbey. He did not know his identity at this time, but he guessed that he must be a great person. Many years later, before the final battle, he told Yi Su about their encounter at the foot of Tianqi Mountain. Many years later, Yi Su had no impression of Ning Ke at that time, but Ning Ke had a deep impression of him. I have never seen a person who can be so lonely. It seems that his feet are not standing on the ground of the human world, but another world. And he is clearly alive, but I feel that he has been dead for many years. This is not accurate. I should say that you seem to be alive and dead in my eyes at that time. I feel sorry for you. Yi Su did not know that a guy whom he regarded as a passerby was pitying him at this time. In his eyes, there was only the scholar in the old coat and worn-out shoes who did not seem to have a sense of existence. After a moment of silence, and no one knew what he was thinking, he calmly greeted the other. "Greetings, Mr. First." Eldest brother replied, "Hello?" Yi Su turned his head and looked at the iron box that Xia Ho had unknowingly held in his hand. Tang's eyes also fell on the iron box. Everyone in the field looked at the iron box, except for Yi Hongyu, who looked at Yi Su with a complicated expression. Even the eldest senior brother was looking at the iron box. However, his calm and gentle gaze did not have any determination to seize it. There was only a strange curiosity. Yi Su suddenly said, "Elder Xia has taken back the tomes of arcane for Haotian Taoism." "Congratulations," Tang said. "People in Haotian Taoism are still as shameless as years ago." Xia Ho said indifferently, "This has nothing to do with Haotian Taoism." Hearing this answer, Yi Su was silent. The emperor and ministers of the Tang Empire were suspicious. Xia Ho had entered the wilderness to steal the tomes of arcane and tried to kill the guy sent by the academy. He would not be able to explain to Chang and afterward. At this time, he was surrounded by people at the Hulun Sea. If he still wanted to keep his reputation and power, he could only rely on his status as a visiting professor of the Divine Hall. Yi Su congratulated him and gave him a chance to get out of trouble. He only needed to exchange the tomes of arcane for it, but Xia Ho did not accept it. Yi Su understood why he did not want to accept it. The dignified general of the Tang Empire could do such a thing. He must have made up his mind and wanted to completely cut off the past years. Moreover, the situation at the Holland Sea was very complicated, so he still had a chance. The most important thing was that Mr. First of the Academy had not said anything. The Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane would appear in the wilderness. This was an edict issued by the great divine priest of revelation after he returned from the South Sea. No one in the world would doubt this, especially Yi Su, who knew that this must be the conclusion of the Abbey Dean. Because of this, many countries in the world sent people into the wilderness to try to enter the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. In the end, Ning Ke and the others succeeded. However, those who were really qualified to steal the tomes of arcane had been secretly waiting. The tomes of arcane were cicadas. Ning Ke and the other young generation were mantises. Xia Ho was the oriole. Tang and Yi Su were the hunters. Eldest brother was nothing. In his words, he was just a passer-by. However, when he passed by the Holland Sea, there was no more story of the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Everyone turned to look at the ordinary-looking scholar. Eldest brother asked Ning Ke, "Do you want that iron box?" Ning Ke shook his head. Hearing his answer, eldest brother did not hesitate at all. He looked at the crowd and said gently, "You can fight for this box if you want. We are just passing by and are in a hurry to go back to Chang'an. So we will leave first. Tomorrow is Saturday. I wish everyone and I have a good rest. I snicker. I can finally drink to my heart's content tonight." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.